Fish?
Here.
Wheeler?
Here. So the purpose of council meetings is to hear the city's business, including hearing from the community on important matters. I'll boil this long statement down to a few shorter ones. Treat everybody with respect, listen to people's opinion, don't interrupt. Understand that there will be people speaking at the mic who have a different perspective than your own. Let's be willing to listen and hear and be respectful of everybody's opinions. If you're a lobbyist, please state so for the record. If you're here representing an organization, that is helpful as well. If you would like to show support, do a simple thumbs up. If you'd like to show a lack of support, thumbs down is fine. We prefer that you not verbally interrupt people during their testimony. If there is a disruption to the meeting, I will issue a warning that if further disruption occurs, you could be removed from the meeting. If you are asked to leave the meeting and you don't do so, you can be arrested for trespassing. We don't want that to happen, so everybody just let everybody speak when it is their turn to do so. Communications, please call the first item. In fact, I believe everybody is here with DCT, so why don't we just call them all up together and maybe we can bring in a couple extra chairs as well.
Items 1047 through 1051, and that is request of Mark Hinkle, Rich Thalmeyer, Mary Protzman, Tony Bush, and Chris Montgomery to address council regarding District Council of Trade Unions bargaining.
Come on up. And if you could just state your name for the record before you speak, that'd be great. Thank you. And the microphones move around. No worries. Good morning.
Good morning. Are we ready?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
All right, my name is Mark Hinkle. Good morning, City Council, and thank you for hearing from myself and the other members of the DC2 bargaining team. I am nearly a 20-year employee of the City of Portland, working out of the instrument electrical shop for BES. When I started 20 years ago, I was 28 years old, and all the employees hired prior to me were under the age of 30. As soon as you could, which was about as soon as you could be hired for the City of Portland after completing school, apprenticeship, and getting some electrical experience to get our licensing. Because we wanted to work for the City of Portland because it was the employer of choice at that time. The wage, the total benefit package was worth putting in the time and applying for the city. Now I'm going to fast forward 20 years. The E&I staff has doubled in size to nearly 30 employees, and I'm still the 5th youngest in the shop. Why is this, you may ask? Well, it's very simple. Really, the retirement that once was helped balancing out the lower wage. Even 20 years ago, I took a $4 or $5 cut an hour to work for the city, but the total benefits package offset that. So at that time, the city had the draw to bring younger, career-minded, and long-term employees. Now, I know that PERS is not totally under your control, but other things like benefits, especially wages, are so. It is up to you and the city to make the city no longer the employer of no choice, but back to the employer of choice. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Rich Thalheimer. Good morning, Mr. Mayor and members of council. And I've worked for the City of Portland since 1999 as a parking code enforcement officer. I'm a member of the DC2 bargaining team, and I represent AFSCME 189. There's a lot of green back there. I'd like to acknowledge my coworkers in the parking enforcement division for all the hard work that they do, because they have one of the most thankless jobs in the city. In addition to generating over $6 million in citation revenue a year, their enforcement helped generate a record $33 million in parking meter revenue last year as well. We respond to 2,500 calls a month for service, and we've addressed 23,000 abandoned auto cases this year. I think they deserve a big thank you for the hard work that they do. In addition to writing parking citations, they also perform many other duties. We collect all the meter money from every meter in the city. We reserve all the spaces in the metered areas downtown. We do booting. We do first responder duties. We tow vehicles left in the right-of-way during snowstorms so the plows can get through. And more recently, we were on the front lines of the homeless crisis. We're out there dealing with the people living in their RVs, knocking on doors, giving them the social services and assistance they need. We're one of several classifications requesting a selective increase. Our request is based on our added duties and the city's own class comp study that shows the code enforcement series is paid at least 10% below market. We perform code enforcement work, but since we have the stigma of being meter maids, I don't feel that we're recognized for the code enforcement work that we do, and we're not paid on the same scale as the other code specialists. The DCTU has been clear on its stance about an across-the-board increase for all of its members. We gave up the first-year cost of living adjustment in the previous contract, and we gave up half of the cost of living adjustment in the current contract because of a bad economy. The economy has now rebounded, and our members are asking to get back what they've sacrificed. What we've seen in bargaining so far is a lack of movement on the city's part. We submitted our financial package early on in bargaining, yet it took the city another 70 days for the city to respond with a financial proposal. I feel that the city is engaged in bad faith bargaining again. It appears to have been a calculated move, though, to draw out bargaining in order to settle contracts with the laborers and PTE 17, and then to force the DCTU to accept what they settled for. Well, I've got news for you. That's not enough for the DCTU. We're bargaining our own contract. We're not bargaining a master contract for all of the other labor organizations in the city. But if you do want to force a contract on us, feel free to force the police PPA contract that gave them 3% a year for 3 years. We would be happy to take that. So several things our members are asking for is an across-the-board increase, no HIPAA release. They value their health insurance information, full retro pay back to July, and keeping the internal promotion language from being eliminated. In all my years working for the city, I've never seen this amount of underlying resentment for how employees have been treated. Every day I get asked, when are we going on strike? If we're pushed to a strike, here's a few things to consider. Who will perform the several hundred inspections at BDS, and how many construction sites and jobs will be delayed because of it? Who will make sure that the water is flowing to the faucets and ensure that the water is clean? Who will write the $20,000 to $30,000 a day in parking tickets? This is what our membership wants and deserves. Please step up and be our employer of choice. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Good morning.
Good morning. No. My name is Tony Bush. I work for the city fleet. I'm a member of the DCTU bargaining team, and I represent the machinists. I'm going to touch on something Rich mentioned, and that is I've worked for the city for 10 years, and in those 10 years, I've been on the previous 2 contract negotiations as well. And a pattern has come to my attention. I mean, I'm a limited time employee, but it seems as though contracts get drug out substantially long after the contract has expired, and this year seems to be no different. However, the biggest difference between this negotiation session and the previous 2 is the previous 2, the city has come to the table, and we've seemed to have been able to work out and continue making progress throughout the bargaining, which makes it a little easier to justify dragging it out as long as we do. This time, however, we were asked to bring a financial proposal to the table early so it could be looked at. And as others have mentioned, it has taken a long time to get that back. It took, I think, something of the tune of 70 days to get a response, which was just a supposal that was good for that day. And the supposal was nowheres in the same stratosphere as what ours was, nor did it touch on any of the issues of why the differences were so great. I think that, to me, that was showing a start of the bad faith bargaining that was to come, was waiting so long to get back. And then when we do come to the table, it's for 2 hours a day, once a week. Well, I'll give the benefit of the doubt, maybe 3 hours some days. But it seems as though the city has a hard deadline that they leave the table at 4 o'clock, or they leave mediation at 5 o'clock when there's room to be made on we have issues that we can talk about. There's movement that can be made. Why leave then? Why can't we get this done? You're saving money off of the backs of the employees that do all the hard labor work for the city. And to us, that's not right. We just want to get this, we want to get a fair contract. We want to get it resolved soon so everybody can get back to work. We can put the sideline grumblings that are happening in all the shops in the past, and everybody can focus on the future. That's not even at all what I wrote down, so I'll just give the rest of my time to someone else.
That's a good statement, though. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Chris Montgomery with Local 701 and the DCTU. I represent the Water Bureau and the FMTs that keep the lights on in this facility. I'm going to piggyback on my brother here and sort of on my brothers and sisters here as well. Although this is my first bargaining session with the DCTU in the city, it is quite frustrating that I work a salary position. The city management team comes to us and they work a salary position, I would assume. But if I can get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go to work and then go home at 9 o'clock at night to bargain sessions, bargain contracts and things like that, then why can't they? Why does it seem that they have banker's hours in order to leave? It doesn't make sense to me. The other thing is you send a chair that has little to no power. So he comes in for a couple of hours, half the management team shows up, and then they leave at a selective special time with no work being done. It doesn't make any sense. This seems systematic to me. It really does. Over the last couple of years, it sounds like this has happened over and over again. And I have to tell you, even though this is my first time as a newcomer, it seems very frustrating. So it's got to be very frustrating to all of the members in green and the other hundreds and hundreds of other members for the city that work hard for you every day. The other point I want to make is that the HIPAA release that you guys are asking for, why would I expose, or they expose their health to the public? And when I say that there's no open, there's no closed loop system to protect that. You're asking the members to do something preposterous. It's ridiculous. As I said, and I mentioned that I represent the FMTs, you have offered no raise for the FMTs for this contract. Although the CPI has went up and up and up, and now it's 2.9%. What are you guys thinking? What's going on here? I don't think you guys understand the impact that you're creating for the DCTU and our members, but I believe that you'll soon understand. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning.
Morning. My name is Mary Protzman. I'm a DCTU bargaining team member and part of the professional staff at the Police Bureau. In November 2016, we began trying to pick dates to meet with the city. We agreed to meet December 8th. That meeting and a few dates in January were canceled due to snow. On December 22nd, we received a final order from the Employee Relations Board ruling that your Labor Relations Manager, Jarrell Gaddis, bargained in bad faith over the implementation of the $15 an hour minimum wage that this council agreed to in 2015. I was part of that interim bargaining team and can attest to the obstinate lack of conversation regarding the impacts, never mind actual negotiations. We finally met our current contract negotiations on January 5th, agreed to ground rules, and agreed that January 12th would be the start of the 150-day bargaining timeline required under the Public Employee Collective Bargaining Act. I left feeling optimistic that BHR was possibly going to be something more akin to a partner navigating the process rather than a barrier, as has been our past experience. On March 30th was the deadline to approve new offers. We provided a complete financial package that day, shooting blind with no idea what the city might or might not be willing to even discuss. On January 8th, we received a supposal, which is a type of non-binding proposal, and the first we had actually seen of anything resembling the city's financial package. This happened 3 days before we passed the 150-day bargaining timeline on June 11th. On June 29th, we received an actual complete counterproposal from the city that was titled as such. It was essentially the same previous proposal retitled. The union's team provided a counter the same day. On July 27th, we provided yet another complete proposal to the city, bargaining against ourselves and continuing to try different ideas to spark productive dialogue. On July 31st, the city requested mediation. On July 17th, we received a second complete counterproposal, virtually the same as before. On September 6th, the union's team provided yet another proposal to the city. And this last Monday, September 25th, the city provided a counterproposal during mediation, moving a little and offering back pay to January 1st, 2016 for police classifications they failed to bargain in good faith over back in 2015. Here is what we, the unions of the DCTU, are asking. Justice for the police professional staff for your labor relation manager's failure to bargain in good faith. Address the class comp issues, most of which have been outstanding since we raised them in 2010. Provide some additional increase to offset the COLAs that we have given up during the lean times and to account for the out-of-control Portland housing market. This includes a retroactive COLA for these negotiations. Everything else we're fine with being status quo. When you see this long list of issues, that's what we need to accept the concessions the city is demanding. You have given lip service to trying to become an employer of choice. We are already employees of choice, and we make this city work, and our demands have not been made in a vacuum. We continue to be far apart on issues most important to your employees, and the city's team seems to be too overwhelmed to have meaningful conversation that will inspire movement, compromise, and settlement. They have even professed to have no strategy for this round of bargaining. It is for these reasons, and those my fellow City of Portland employee representatives have already shared, we declare impasse.
Sorry to hear that. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for coming in. First time certain, please.
Shall we have the consent agenda?
Oh, yeah, my understanding is, there are 4 items that have been pulled for discussion.
And we have one more also.
One more. So I have 1058, 1062, 1063, 1064, and what do you have?
And then this morning, 1061.
And 1061 is also. Call the roll on the remainder.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Wheeler.
All right, consent agenda is adopted. Let's go back to the time certain 1053, please.
1052.
1052.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
1052, I apologize.
1052, appoint Candace Albalas to the Citizen Review Committee Advisory Board to the Independent Police Review, a division of the City Auditor's Office.
Good morning. Another day in paradise.
Yes. Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
Anika Bent-Albert, Assistant Director of the Independent Police Review. You guys want to state your name?
Candace Avalos, candidate for Citizen Review Committee.
Excellent.
And Rachel Mortimer, the other Assistant Director at the Independent Police Review.
Thank you for being here.
So we are here before you this morning to seek the appointment of Ms. Carmen Avalos to the Citizens Review Committee, CRC, which is a volunteer advisory board to the Independent Police Review Division. CRC members are responsible for gathering community concerns about police services, developing policy recommendations to address patterns of problems with police services, conducting, reviewing, and advising IPR on the complaint handling process, and hearing appeals from community members and officers regarding the recommended findings of completed administrative investigations. The appointment of Ms. Avalos will serve to fill a vacancy resulting from the resignation of one member of the CRC. We're very grateful to have Ms. Avalos' interest in serving on the CRC. Do you have any questions for us?
Colleagues, any further questions? Very good. Any public testimony on this item?
We have 3 signed up to testify.
Okay. Looks like you can cool your heels for a few minutes and we'll hear public testimony.
Okay, thank you.
Shedrick Wilkins, Joe Walsh, and Dan Handelman.
I'm Shedrick Wilkins, and I support people, different minorities seeking the police review board. Also, I strongly support that our mayor has chosen to make the first woman African-American police chief. I think these are good steps to deal with some of the criticism of the police handling of different racial issues even across the nation. I also support the mayor's in this guy named Tyrone Poole, who wants to have a faster way to rent. One of the issues is some people have past police convictions. Now here's something you ought to think about. Up till the year 2014, marijuana was illegal in this state. And there were a lot of minorities dealing with marijuana, although it does have medicinal value. And they may have police records that may deny them housing, right? And they be pushed into a corner, and that involves the police. And so that's important, and it's also important to realize that marijuana is now legal. You know, and even Joseph Kennedy, John F. Kennedy's father, dealt with illegal alcohol during Prohibition, but then Prohibition was rescinded. So some of these crimes are crimes of the times. And I personally like President Kennedy, and the fact that his father was a bootlegger in Prohibition doesn't bother me. So these are cultural things, things that change. I do believe that marijuana is a medicine, and that people in the past 10 or 20 years that have dealt with marijuana and sold it illegally may have been doing the right thing.
Thank you.
If it pleases the presiding official, I would like to defer to Dan.
Good morning, Mayor and City Commissioners. I'm Dan Handelman from Portland Cop Watch. And I was here on August 9th, and you appointed another member to CRC, Daniel Schwartz, who I mentioned at the time had attended more CRC meetings in the past year than Mr. Jim Young, who is being replaced today. Earlier this year, in April, you appointed Mr. Young to a seat after he had missed 10 of the previous 15 CRC meetings. We objected to that. The mayor asked that Mr. Young attend future CRC meetings by electronic means. He did not do so. He voluntarily resigned, but as a result, basically the seat has been more or less empty since April. Several years ago, also, the CRC was dominated by retirees, and most of them members were age 50 or older, and Mr. Young was, until he resigned, the only retiree on CRC and the eldest member, and he was one of 4 white men. The appointment today will create a CRC that will have 4 women of color, 3 white women, and a Latino man, and a woman who identifies as LGBTQ. Candace Avalos, who's up for today, I don't know anything about her other than what I read in her application, which I know you all read because that's part of the city code. We have no specific objections to her appointment today, but I just want to point out that since she's in a 18 to 25-year-old age bracket, that 9 out of the 11 members of CRC are under age 45 at this point. So we went from having too many older and retired members to having the pendulum swing completely the other way. And I've mentioned this before, and I think there's a value to having people who have extra time on their hands, given the amount of work the CRC has to do. Also, I should mention that CRC was a subject of much debate, and council made a couple of tweaks to their abilities earlier this year, but there was promise that there would be a work session to talk more about the structure of IPR and CRC. I haven't heard anything about that. We asked to be included in that. I have attended more CRC members than anybody on the planet, so I'm hoping that Portland Cop Watch will be invited to the table when and if that happens. Ms. Avalos mentions wanting to work on policy, which is very important. CRC has really dropped the ball on their work groups because they're spending so much time on their appeals. But one of their work groups works on crowd control, and we've been attending those meetings. In fact, there's only one CRC member sitting on that work group right now, so I'm hoping she'll join that one. And we sent out our analysis of the current crowd control policy yesterday, and we hope you all got a chance to look that over. Also, Mr. Schwartz, the last person you appointed, as I said, attended more meetings than Mr. Young. I don't think I've ever seen Ms. Avalos at a meeting. I've checked the minutes. I don't see her name in there, but that might not be meaningful because my name wasn't listed in one meeting and I've been to all of them. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. And you sent that via email yesterday, is
Yes.
that correct?
Uh-huh.
I'm not sure I got it, but I'll check and make sure I did.
All right.
I didn't see that yesterday, but I'll look into that, and I appreciate that. Thank you. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. My name is Joe Walsh, and I represent Individuals for Justice. And we take no money from you. We testified last week about nonprofits coming before you, and we would like them to make the same statement or at least disclose how much money they are taking from you so we know who's paying who. We take no money from anybody. We also have no money. The reason that I'm testifying on this today and defer to Dan is Individuals for Justice would really like it just once when Dan and the AMA and other people that are really interested in police accountability come before you and say, you know, we had a really great connection with you guys, and we worked out all the problems of these appointees. You know, we never get that. What we get is objections, 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 and then you guys just rubber stamp it anyway. And that gets tiring after a while. So we looked at the application, and the application is impressive. You know, I can't figure out how you get people to volunteer 18, 20 hours a week when they have that kind of a resume. How do you do that? You know, she's a really impressive woman. And we have a lot of impressive people on committees. And then I asked my last question is, then why are we in so much trouble? You know, got a lot of bright people running around and we're in a lot of trouble. So we would like, again, to say to you, think about at least giving stipends to some of these volunteers. At least reimburse them if they're suffering, you know, payouts, parking and gas and stuff like that. You ought to consider that on every committee. I know that sounds like, whoa, that would be huge. But we are going to talk about today, Amanda, you're going to give $1 million to TriMet via the schools. $1 million. So it seems like you guys got money. And I used to kid Charlie Hales about going down into the basement to find new money. So go down to the basement again and give these volunteers some stipends or reimbursements. You know, I can't figure out why you don't have more problems with volunteers showing up. So I was a volunteer, and you asked me to do 20, and it's never 20 hours. It's always 40 hours. It's always doubled. So we ran into with COAP. They were working like crazy with nothing. So we support what Dan is saying, and we're suggesting to you that this is a really good volunteer, and you did a good job on that. We give you that one. However, you must continue it, and you must figure out a way to reimburse these people. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Watchdog X. I do approve of the candidate, Avalos, for the Citizen Review Committee. One of the questions on the application, have you or your family member ever participated in an organization that advocates a position regarding the police or the criminal justice system? No. I have worked for the Office of Judicial Affairs at James Madison University, in which worked with police to review cases and taught alcohol education classes to at-risk students. Maybe I'm reading that a little bit wrong, but that appears that you have worked with the police directly and you have worked alongside of them. Issue number 2, also being involved in the sexual assaults. I want to make it very clear to you, the Portland police have been a disgrace pertaining to the rape kits. They should have never had a backlog like that. It was one of the worst in history, pathetic performance. Any commissioners up here that were involved in that, I would remove them from their chairs if I had the authority. I do not at this time. Again, just so we have an understanding, but when we get ready to vote for them, there are ways to remove them. And when you look at the facts behind what I'm saying on the rape kits, anyone sitting up here siding with the Portland police on their conduct, on having kits not tested for over 10 years, you shouldn't be sitting up there. You should have the ability to say, I'm not satisfied with that. I couldn't be satisfied with that. There were people that raped people that were still outside on the loose because of the conduct. How could you be satisfied with that and sit up there and side with them? You can't. You shouldn't be an elected official if you did. And I'm making it very clear. Since you were involved in sexual assault and reviewing that, make a stand on Portland police on those rape kits. Make a stand to make sure they're tested and timely. Make a stand on that and understand, Portland police made a lot of big mistakes there, and it should never happen again. Just on another issue from my position is that I noticed on the application that you write in there, would you be willing to participate in a 9/11 sit-along? Yes. Would you be willing to take 6 hours of equity diversity training, which I do agree with, absolutely. Would you be willing to participate in at least one police ride-along each year you serve? Yes. I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if I agree with them sitting alongside the police on ride-alongs. I want it independent. I want them separated, and I want them to analyze the police and remain completely neutral. Thank you.
Thank you. Does that complete public testimony? Please call the roll.
Salzman.
Well, thank you, Ms. Avalos, for your willingness to serve. It is a big time commitment, and it's a very important position for the residents of our city to help us carry out our responsibilities with respect to policing in the city of Portland. Thank you. Aye.
You Daly.
Congratulations on your appointment, and thank you for being willing to serve our city. Aye.
Fritz.
Thank you so much for being here, as well as being willing to serve in hearing some of the testimony that we had. For the record, we did take action when we found out about the rape kits, and there isn't a backlog anymore. And there's also many things that are not resolved, and so we need to engage your partnership in telling us what to do about the policies, as well as the individual things that you do on the Citizens Review Committee. I hope to continue to have a liaison that will report to me directly often, because I believe in what you're doing, and I know that the community wants you to be there and wants you to really dig in and give us your plain advice, which I believe you will have absolutely no difficulty doing. Aye.
Fish.
Well, thank you very much for your willingness to serve, and you'll now be interacting with the city in two fundamental ways. One, helping us get the police reform and accountability agenda right, but also you work at Portland State University, which we see as central to the future success of our city. And so we're delighted that you're in two leadership positions and that we'll have an opportunity to work with you. And thank you for signing up to do this work. Aye.
Wheeler.
Well, I appreciate Candace. I think you're a very strong candidate for this, and I agree with those who provided testimony. When I looked at your resume, I was blown away. I think you're going to be a great addition. I think you bring a good perspective, and I look forward to your leadership. So welcome, and thank you for your service. I vote aye. The appointment's approved. Thank you. Congratulations. Next item, please. Let's see, yeah, we're at 10 o'clock. Go ahead, 10:53, please.
10:53, authorize amendment to proposed transaction terms for expansion of stadium with Peregrine Sports LLC for the expansion of Providence Park.
Colleagues, I'm pleased with the progress that's being made so far to move forward with the expansion to Providence Park. You'll recall that we approved the right-of-way encroachment recently, and I understand that the permitting process is moving along very well. The resolution today is the next step to assure a timely start to construction activities. As you know, the time frame is quite tight. This is all expected to get underway within the next week or two. Susan Hartnett with the Office of Management and Finance is here, and she's going to provide a brief staff report. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Commissioners. For the record, Susan Hartnett, Spectator Venues Program Manager, Office of Management and Finance. I am just going to do a really quick overview of the resolution and why we're bringing it to you now. Mike Golub from Peregrine Sports is here as well. He's not planning on joining me, but if you want more details or have questions, he's happy to come up.
I do have a question for Mike when you're finished.
Okay, great. So as the mayor said, we are making great progress on all necessary fronts, and it's a multi-pronged approach here to bring this expansion to fruition and actually get it into the ground in the next couple of weeks. Staff in numerous bureaus, and I would call out in particular BDS and PBOT, are really working very diligently to meet the schedules for the various reviews and permits that are required. As the mayor mentioned, to date, we've got design review completed and approved, and the major encroachment in the right-of-way was approved by council a couple of weeks ago. The project has been broken into a couple of phases, and that's been done in part to facilitate permitting so that the initial work can start early, and that is on target for October 2nd was the date. I'm not quite sure if we're going to make that, but we won't be far behind that. The item before you today is also needed to make sure that that early October construction start can happen. You may recall back in June when we brought the original term sheet to you that we thought we would be here with formal agreements for your review and approval prior to what was the initial construction start date of November 1. But that schedule has advanced. As you know, the window between the two seasons is very short, and Peregrine and their contractor, Turner Construction, need to take advantage of really every minute available to them. So the resolution authorizes the mayor to sign an amendment to the term sheet. And what that amendment does is it gives Peregrine and Turner permission to begin construction activities, including demolition, so they will actually be starting to take apart parts of the stadium as soon as certain conditions, and the conditions include insurance and contracts being approved by the city. We are working very fast to try and do that, email exchange constantly happening, and I expect we will get there in the next couple of days. The amendment also makes these terms binding, and in particular, what's of interest to the city is the make-whole obligation on Peregrine is now a binding obligation. So if for some reason, and we don't anticipate this, but if for some reason the project were not to move forward, Peregrine would have to put back together the parts of the stadium that they're going to begin taking apart in advance of the formal agreements being signed. We do expect to be back with the formal agreements in early November, but the schedule of work that we attached to this amendment actually covers work that's anticipated through the end of November. We figured let's give ourselves a little bit of breathing room. So they have sufficient approval from the council with this action to work through the end of November, and we are certain we will get back here by the end of November with those documents. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any questions, and I'm sure Mike will come up and answer the
I have an unrelated question for Mike, so let's first address our questions to you.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to make sure that my particular seats are not going to be affected for October 7th, which is when the Thorns will be playing their semi-final game. Yeah,
that is absolutely correct. It is stuff that will be happening down, out of sight. People will not know what's happening unless they got a tour of the dark underside of the building. So.
Thank you. And just to clarify, that was a joke. I'm certainly not saying that you need to give me special privileges, but I know that everybody is driving for the finish of the season, and I'm glad to hear that all of the stadium will be in good working order until after we've won both cups, maybe.
Absolutely. That would be great.
Two questions for Mike, if I could.
Mike, why don't you come on up? If you could state your name for the record, please.
Good morning. Mike Gala, President of Business for the Portland Thorns and Portland Timbers.
Mike, both of your teams, the Timbers and the Thorns, are having really terrific years, and we're getting toward the end of the season. So could you remind us about how what the plan is at the end of the season and the potential plan for playoffs?
The Thorns have one home regular season game remaining this coming Saturday against Chicago. We've clinched either second or first. 4 teams of the 10 qualify for the playoffs. There's a slight chance if we win and North Carolina loses out that we could win the Shield, the best regular season record. Most likely we'll finish second, which ensures the home game that Commissioner Fritz referenced will be October 7th, 12:30, both Saturday's game and that game, the semifinal game on the 7th, will be nationally televised on Lifetime Network. Should we prevail on the 7th in the semifinal game, which will likely be either against Orlando or Chicago again, we would then travel to Orlando, which is the neutral site location for the championship game on October 14th. And should we, knock wood, win there, we would come back, fly the team back the next day, the 15th, and do a series of celebrations in town. So that's the Thorns picture.
That's the Thorns. Give us a preview on the Timbers.
Timbers, we have 3 games remaining. We currently sit in second place. We've had a very good last couple months, and 2 of those 3 games are at home, and it's very likely we'll have a home game, at least a home game, and if we continue to have the kind of run that we had in 15, several home games. So both teams seem to be peaking at the right time, so it's an exciting time for us and our supporters.
And is Diego Valeri in the run for MVP in the men's league?
He's thinking about running for Dan's seat next year, but
that would clear the field.
Diego Valeri actually leads the league in goals scored with 20. Most goals scored by any midfielder in the history of Major League Soccer. He's scored in 9 consecutive games, which is the longest consecutive streak in the history of Major League Soccer. He broke it 2 games ago with his 8th goal in 8 games. So he and New York's player, a legendary Spanish player, David Villa, are really the only 2 legitimate candidates for MVP. So if Diego has a really good last 3 games and we continue to do well as a team, we could have the MVP trophy right here in Portland.
When does that get announced?
It gets voted on after the regular season. It gets announced during the playoff season. I don't know exactly when, Nick. I'll follow up with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Very good. All right. Is there any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Please call the roll.
Salzman.
Well, congratulations on the great season the Thorns and the Timbers are having, and it's very exciting, and this is very exciting to get this thing underway as soon as possible. Aye.
Udaley. Aye. Fritz.
It's very good to be doing this in collaboration, in partnership, and with the city's only fees being the negotiations fees and the oversight rather than direct taxpayers' intervention. So thank you very much. Aye.
Fish.
Mike, congratulations to you and the whole organization. Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The resolution's adopted. Thank you. So, colleagues, what I'd propose we do at this point, we have 15 minutes till the next time certain. I'd propose we go back to the pulled items on the consent agenda, and hopefully we have people here for each of those items. We'll start with item number 1058, I believe is the first pull. I'm sorry. Yeah, we do have 1058. And that is Commissioner Saltzman. Was Andrew Scott going to testify on that?
You know, I have a note here that he's not able to make it until after the regular agenda. So at the
Very
end
good.
of the
How
meeting.
about 1061?
1061.
Good morning. And who pulled 1061?
And Lightning pulled 1061. Let me read the title, please. Authorize application to the Oregon Department of Aviation for a critical Oregon Air Relief Program grant in an amount of $123,000 for downtown Portland Heliport modernization project.
Good morning.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Michael Jacobs. I work with PBOT. I manage the Smart Park garages, and the heliport happens to be on top of the NATO and Davis Smart Park garage. I'll just be very brief. The Grant application. The intent of the grant funds is to upgrade critical systems at the heliport, including landing lights, the pedestrian lights, the weather monitoring station, and new windsocks and masts. The city is required to match 25%, about $40,000. That money will be used for some staffing costs, but mostly for upgrading the fire suppression equipment. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Public testimony, please. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Watchdog X. I want to have a clear understanding. The downtown heliport currently has the distinction of being Oregon's only public use heliport. Now, it's my understanding, I absolutely approve of any type of work that's going to continue to be done on this. One of the things I might have a problem is on the grant application itself is having to use this for public use for 20 years in the application itself. I don't know if that's really necessary to have in there. Another issue I have on this is that I want to have a study done on, in the event any type of accident takes place at the heliport, what is the response on that type of an accident? Say a helicopter has a problem. What is the response and what will be the plan if something happens? Because in the first 6 months of 2017, you had approximately 1,500 landings. Now, in 2016, you had 3,000. So it appears though your landings are actually decreasing a little bit. I wanted to have a clear understanding on this too, is to make sure that the city has outright ownership of this heliport. And Northwest Rotorcraft Association does not have any ownership. I'm not quite sure where they fit into this agreement, if they're on some type of a lease to overlook it. Now, another question I have on this heliport is that this is being currently used in 2016 as 59% transient general aviation, 39% air taxi, and 2% military. I don't have any issues with the military or any type of emergency type use. I have a little bit of an issue in understanding the qualifications of the pilots as far as air taxis or general aviation type use. I want to have an understanding how you check out the pilots, who's landing on this landing, what are their qualifications, and I want to have a clear understanding on what you expect, considering that this heliport is located by a new office building on one side, an office building on the back side, the MAX train also going underneath on the other side. I want to have a clear understanding from safety issues, from noise to environmental issues, on what plan you have to safeguard this heliport. And I want to have a clear understanding that if we're looking at more type of use as far as air taxis, such as Uber, Elevate, such as my good friend at Google, Larry Page, we want to have an understanding on where you want to start looking at this as far as on that type of use in the future and what type of cost that will be to these companies to utilize this heliport downtown Portland. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Again, for the record, my name is Joe Walsh. I represent Individuals for Justice, and we still do not take any money from you. One of the things that I would like to point out to the people listening to this is these grants, it's almost like somebody has a job of looking at all the list of grants and say, oh, that's kind of interesting, let's go for that one. These grants are not free. The testimony, if I heard it correctly, and my hearing is also going, it's going to cost us 40 grand if we get the grant, which isn't too bad. I mean, that's 3 to 1, 4 to 1, but it's not free. And $40,000 to you guys is very little money. It's not even a drop in a bucket. I think you consider it a mist in a bucket. But it's $40,000, and the people that are listening to this are struggling, and they say, you know, do we really need this? Nobody's telling us why we need this. I don't know, I haven't heard anybody up there know why we need a heliport in the middle of downtown. Nice. New York has it, but New York also has 10 million people. So we get the feeling sometimes on these grants when sometimes Mayor Hale would lecture us and say, no. You know, we're just asking for the money. You know, we're not spending the money. Yes, you are. If you get the grant, you will spend the money. So I think that a little bit of honesty would be nice. If you tell the people that this is not a free ride, not a free lunch, the state's not giving us free money, neither does the Fed, we have to put up a proportion, 5, 10%, 25%, whatever they require. But it costs us. And you guys do this a lot. You go after these grants a lot. And even when you get it, it seems to me that it's a lose-lose for the city, not a win-win. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is there any further testimony, colleagues? Any further questions? Call the roll.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley. Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the ordinance is adopted. Could you read items 1062, 63, and 64 together, please?
All right, and also 1058, Director Scott is here.
All right, Andrew, do you have a few minutes? Can you wait? Okay, very good. 62 to 64.
1062, authorize an intergovernmental agreement with David Douglas School District for $306,797 to support a student transit pass program to provide TriMet transit passes to lower-income high school students. 1063, authorize an intergovernmental agreement with Multnomah County School District 1J, aka Portland Public Schools, for $128 to support a student transit pass program to provide TriMet passes to all Portland Public School high school students. 1064, authorize an intergovernmental agreement with Park Rose School District for $72,075 to support a student transit pass program to provide TriMet transit passes to lower-income high school students.
Commissioner Fritz.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm really excited to do this. I'll be introducing Janine Gates, who worked on it, in just a second. I also said the City Council started giving Portland Public Schools, the largest district in Portland, excuse me, funds in 2009, were at the beginning of the recession, as a way to help that school district at their request to get transportation to on TriMet. As we kept doing it over and over, always with one-time money, it became increasingly clear that it was a very inequitable thing to do, was just give money to Portland Public Schools and not to David Douglas and to Park Rose, which are the other two school districts which are entirely within the city of Portland. So in this budget, the council chose to have the same amount of money that would have been allocated to Portland Public Schools, and to have a process to decide how to divide that up between the three districts. And so I'm delighted to turn over also to Commissioner Udaley for some opening remarks, because she and Winter Johannes and her staff were very important in that process to help figure it out in partnership with the youth of our community.
Thank you, Commissioner Fritz. I'll keep it brief. I'm just really pleased and proud to see years of advocacy by Opal and other community advocates translate into increased transit access for students in East Portland. As we all know, transit access is critical for keeping students connected, not just to their schools, but also to jobs, recreational opportunities, extracurricular programs, and the larger community. I'm thankful that Portland Public Schools has decided to provide youth passes for all of their students this year, and I look forward to seeing the reports from David Douglas and Park Rose about their first year implementing a youth pass program in their schools.
Good morning, Council. I'm Janine Gates, and I'm the Constituent Services Specialist for Commissioner Fritz. So I was part of Multnomah Youth Commission when I was in high school at De La Salle North Catholic High School, and I was on the committee to get youth pass to Portland Public Schools. And on that committee, I remember saying, well, we're doing a disservice. All Portland high school students do not attend Portland Public Schools, and so I feel like a dream is coming true. So I want to thank you all for thinking about East Portland and also tasking us with meeting together with the Portland Public Schools District, David Douglas School District, and Park Road School District, as well as Monoma Youth Commission and Opal's Youth Environmental Justice Alliance Group. We met in June to discuss how should we allocate $967,000 in an equitable way. And from one meeting with Brad Taylor as our facilitator, which was very helpful to meet one time to discuss that in 3 hours. That was pretty phenomenal to me. And so in the meeting, we went back and forth about ways to split the money and decided that we should base the $967K on how many low-income students are attending the school. And that didn't necessarily mean that only low-income students would get the bus pass. It was just a way of measuring how can we use it in an equitable way. And also the money was decided that it would be used for TriMet monthly bus passes only, which will allow the students to get to and from school, as well as extracurricular activities such as work and whatever they're doing with their schools. The meeting was fruitful. I think that it was really great. We all left pretty happy. And so I would like to thank everyone that helped get this where we are today. Commissioner Fritz for advocating for Youth Pass in East Portland for the last several years. Commissioner Daly for ensuring the youth voices were centered and respected. Godan Salazar, who works with Commissioner Fritz, and Winter Johannes, who works for Commissioner Daly, for getting Youth Pass to council today and working with me to make sure that voices were all heard. School districts for coming to the meeting and being open, and Portland Public Schools for being open to splitting that money after receiving it several years, which they will have to figure out how they will use their budget to make sure that every student has a bus pass. And then Brad Taylor, he was an amazing facilitator. It's always nice to work with him, so I appreciate that. And then Pooja Bhatt and Claire Adamsick, who was also in Commissioner Fritz's office, for helping me file my first council item. That was very difficult, so I really do appreciate them. And I appreciate the support and the many hands that helped us get here today. So thank you, council.
Thank you. Thank you. Colleagues, any further questions?
So, yeah, so the money can only be used for TriMet bus passes?
Correct.
Correct, okay, great, thanks.
Very good. Any public testimony on this item?
We did not have a sign-up sheet out for this one. Should say we're on consent.
Good morning again. For the record, my name is Joe Walsh. I represent Individuals for Justice. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the concept of moving money and having the students ride TriMet and pay for those passes, the monthly passes. I like that idea. And even though the expenditure, if you add it up, and I did it really fast, and since I majored in psychology, I'm a terrible person at math, it's about $1 million. You're saying you're giving it to 3 school districts. No, you're not. You're giving it to TriMet via 3 school districts. TriMet ends up with the money. Otherwise, why bother? TriMet has to get the money because they're the vendor. So why not give it directly to TriMet? Just do it. You know, get the passes, and at least that would be honest. But you're putting out the school districts first. Now, our question on this is TriMet doing anything, or are they just receiving the money? So like when I buy a pass, because I'm an old guy now, it's pretty reasonable. And student passes are also reasonable. And again, we should support the students, but that's not what you're doing. You're paying off TriMet. I mean, are they saying, look, these are students, normally it costs $2 for a pass, or $1.25 for the students. Let's knock it down to 50 cents and let the city reimburse us. Now that would be cool, but there's nothing in the documents, and I'll grant you, the 3 school districts, there's a lot of documents and a lot of pages to read on that, and contract language will put you to sleep in about 5 minutes. So it's too long. you can't read it in one session. You really need some time. And also, these are 3 individual items. We should be entitled to 9 minutes. I know we're not getting it, and I know you're doing this under emergency, and I know you're going to pass it, but we're going on the record of saying we like the idea of what you're trying to do. We don't like the way you're doing it. And we think you're dishonest. And Commissioner Fritz, I know you want to say something, and please, if you say something, answer that question. Is TriMet stepping up on this, or we are on our own, doing something that we really don't have to do? It's a nice thing to do, but we don't have to do it.
May I answer?
Oh, sure.
In the past, Portland Public Schools, TriMet, and the city have put in equal amounts so that all the students in Portland Public Schools could get bus passes. So that's what I believe Portland Public is planning to do. Oh, thank you. Slower. That's what I believe that Portland Public is going to do this time, that the district will be supplementing the money that the city gives them, and then TriMet will match that, or will provide the final third. In the other school districts, they still provide yellow school bus service. So when we talked with them, their boards and superintendents were not interested in providing them for everyone, and they weren't interested. They weren't able at that time to put any of the school district's money in for the one-third. So it's left open to the school districts as to how they want to either supplement and get into an agreement with TriMet, or just use that money for the bus passes. That was one. What was the second question that you asked, Mr. Walsh?
The second part of my question is, it would be helpful if we understood that the city is donating, in a sense, $1 million. Okay, how much is TriMet donating?
In the past, when they were matching the 967, they were giving
Thank you, Mr.
1/3. So another 967, and Portland Public Schools was giving another 967. And that was so they could give passes to all students, not just those on free and reduced lunch. You're right, Mr. Walsh, and I want to read from ORS 237-043. When a district is required to provide transportation, a school district, this is state law, is required to provide transportation for elementary schools for elementary students who live more than 1 mile from school, and for secondary school students who reside more than 1.5 miles from school. So yes, it actually is the school district who is required to provide that. As I said, during the recession, we were helping out Portland Public Schools because they asked, and previously the other districts had not. And there is a part 2 to this transportation requirement, which says, notwithstanding what I just read, the State Board of Education may waive the requirement on the high school students if they present a plan up to the board, a plan providing or identifying suitable and sufficient alternate modes of transporting secondary school students. Your second point, that the city doesn't have to do that, I absolutely agree with. We're past the recession now. Of course, we're going to have a difficult budget as always. We have responsibilities as a city council that we're not paying for because we are giving this giving this $927,000 again to now 3 school districts divided equitably. It's something that I think the city council cannot continue to sustain, and we'll be having that discussion in the next budget. But certainly this particular 3 items is for just this year. There's no promise that we're going to do it again.
Okay, I'm willing to waive the 9 minutes. Just let me answer that, and then I'll shut up. It's still not clear to me who's paying for what. If the city is paying the $900,000, or as I do as a liberal arts major, rounded off to $1 million, is the public schools putting up another $1 million? And I mean the 3 districts, and is TriMet equaling that? If the 3 of us go to lunch and we split the lunch, it's $10 a piece. That's what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in the city giving money to the school district or to TriMet, no matter how you slice it, and then next year, and I suspect we're going to be in a lot of trouble next year, pull that money and the school district's screwed. So that's what worries me all the time. So if the three entities are equally contributing, all right, at the worst case scenario, you drop down to 2 if the city pulls out. So they still have $2 million. You see what I'm saying? I'm just saying I don't want the city to take the burden on their shoulders and next year saying, too bad. And by the way, I have a granddaughter in David Douglas. So, you know, when I read this,
we need to move this along.
I would be happy to discuss it with you.
Excuse me?
I'd be happy to discuss it with you or Janine.
I didn't hear what you said.
We're backed up, and I think your point is very well made.
We have 9 minutes on this, technically. And I said I would waive it if you let me finish.
Excuse me, you don't get to make that decision. I do.
Yes, I do.
Good afternoon. Good morning.
I want the 9 minutes.
You don't get 9 minutes. You don't get 9 minutes.
I want the 9 minutes.
You don't get it. It's 3.
Okay, how
Good
are you doing that? Under the charter, it says I have 9 minutes.
You're interrupting, and if you continue to interrupt, Mr. Walsh, you'll be asked to leave. You know the rules. Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay. Good morning.
My name is Lightning. I represent Lightning Super Watchdog X. State law does not require you to pay this, but it requires the Portland Public Schools to pay it. They came back with an exception to that rule with a plan with the city stepping up and putting up approximately $1 million to match TriMet $1 million and them also $1 million. But that was during times of hardship. That was during a recession. We are not in a recession right now. This is not a hardship time for the Portland Public Schools. Now, granted, they do need funding, I do agree. But this is a totally different type of a situation here to where we need funding at the city. The mayor's talking about maybe having to not fund homeless projects at the full amount anymore. He might have to start restricting some of the funding. So where you take funding from one area, you take it from the other. And the reality is that at this point, Portland Public Schools should step up. You're making this decision yourself in violation of state law because originally you stepped in when there was a recession. There is not now. So it's hard for me to understand how you can sit there and say this is a legitimate cost to pay. This is legitimate when state law says that the Portland Public Schools should pick it up. There's no hardship here. There's no recession. So I am absolutely against this, and there is no reason why this should be paid anymore. This should have been stopped. This should not be going forward. And I'm saying vote no on this. State law, they'll still be funded, I can assure you. Even if some private investors out there from some nonprofits will step up and pay this, which they should, and they have the money to do it, and this is a worthy cause to do it. But this is not something the city of Portland needs to be paying at this time. There is no recession. There's no legitimate reason to be paying it, and we're looking at maybe other costs in other areas which are reasonable, but we shouldn't be losing that money toward TriMet passes to the public schools. What's more important? What is your jobs up here to do? You want to represent the public schools? Go work for the public schools. You want to make sure they get funding? Well, go fund them. Go work for them. Go raise money for them. You're the city of Portland. You're the city of Portland. And again, I always want to see the kids get funding, and they would get funding if you voted no today. I can assure you they'll get their funding. Thank you.
Very good. Please call the roll on 1062.
Salzman.
I just wanted to commend the capable staff work of Ms. Gates and her first council documents. Aye.
Udaley.
First, I'd like to thank all the young leaders who've successfully advocated for the council to include Park Rose and David Douglas as recipients of Youth Pass funding. I was impressed not only by the successful campaign they ran, but also by their thoughtful proposals for how the money should be allocated among the 3 districts. In particular, I want to thank the following Multnomah Youth Commissioners: Lexi Moyer, Manuela, my little pronunciation key is gone, I'm going to truncate it, Perez, and Jessica Monet Perez, as well as Andrea Marquez and the Youth Development Coordinator. Also, thank you to Maria Hernandez Segoviano and Jennifer Fung for Opal Environmental Justice, as well as Anna and Maylena from the Youth Environmental Justice Alliance. In addition to the youth and community advocates, I'd like to thank the districts for their participation in this process. Thank you to Portland Public Schools representatives Anna Richter-Taylor and Courtney Westling, David Douglas representatives Rolando Flores and Barbara Keenley, and Park Rose representatives Dr. Karen Gray and Christine Blauk. Finally, I want to thank city staff, including Goldan and Janine from Commissioner Fritz's office. Thank you to ONI staff member Brad Taylor for facilitating the work session just to decide how the money would be allocated. Thank you in particular to Winta Johannes from my office for working so diligently on this. And finally, thank you to Antoinette Toku in the Grants Office, who is brand new to the city and for whom this is the first item she has prepared for council. Aye.
Fritz.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Daly, not only for your partnership in the process, but also for reading the entire list of the people that we jointly thank. And so I'm not going to read it again. It has taken a lot of people to get to this point. So obviously, Janine, this is her first presentation with me, at least, not before the council, and I appreciate that. And Winta Johannes in your office, Commissioner, is always very communicative. Brad Taylor, no longer with the city, unfortunately, but has proved his worth as a facilitator. The other thing I want to do is go back to the start of all this, which was Sisters in Action for Power, which started at Jefferson High School when my kids were in school, where those young women started the ball rolling about we need help to get the bus to school. And it's not only the yellow buses, because at that time, I think that we may still have had yellow buses in Portland Public Schools, but it's also that you can't do activities, you can't use the yellow buses to get to your job. If you happen to miss the yellow bus, this year we heard from Parkhurst High School students who did a survey, and I think it was something like 40% of their students had at least once missed the school bus and either had to walk a very long way or miss school. And so as we're all invested in our high school students getting to school and doing the learning that they need to do to graduate, I do appreciate this appropriation, and I also appreciate that we're giving a rapid heads up to the school districts that we appreciate their partnership this year, and it's unlikely that we're going to be able to continue it in perpetuity. Aye.
Fish.
Thank you all for your good work. Aye.
Wheeler.
So I'll just say this. It's always unfortunate to me as the presiding officer when we have testimony that goes the way the testimony went. The irony is I actually agree with Mr. Walsh. To be clear, we looked very hard at not funding the program in this year's budget. And while it is very important that young people have access to transportation to get to school, the reality is this is way out of our lane. And it is something that was done in the midst of a crisis. It was done out of benevolence for all of the right reasons. But here we are years later, and we are still supporting transportation for kids going to school. And the reality is, as Mr. Walsh and others have mentioned, there are core responsibilities that we have as a city, as a municipal government, that we are not meeting. And we did not want to just drop this in the laps of TriMet or the school districts or anyone else. We wanted to give a clear runway. The reason we chose to fund it this year was because students are allowed to start signing up for the bus program in July, if I remember correctly. So we would be finishing our budget in June, and then July would come around a month later, And we just decided logistically that was not enough notice. That wasn't going to work. Commissioners Fritz and Udaley took the lead on at least making sure that this last contribution is an equitable contribution between the 3 districts, which I absolutely support. I think it's the right way. And I appreciate the long list of people that you worked with to make sure that we did it right here today. The ordinance is adopted. 1063, please.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. 1064, please.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Andrew, can you make 1058 fast for us? We're about 15 minutes behind. Thank you.
1058, authorize a request for proposal to obtain the most responsible and responsive proposer for a new budgeting software system.
Great. Good morning.
Good morning. Andrew Scott, City Budget Director, and I'm here with Jess Eden, who is our project manager on this replacement. I will be very brief. Last year in the 2016-17 fall bump process, Council allocated $1 million as a placeholder to replace our budget software. The current budget software we have is unsupported and has an end-of-life date in 2020, and so does need to be replaced. In the meantime, over the last year, we've engaged in quite a bit of due diligence on the project. We've talked to numerous vendors to get a sense of what's out there. We've convened city staff to discuss system requirements and other potential enhancements to the system that they might want to see. We did contract with an outside consultant to help work on these RFP requirements, which will be in the RFP that'll be issued if council moves forward with that. We have discussed this with the city's Technology Executive Steering Committee, which is an internal group, and they were actually the group that recommended we we go more broadly than the current vendor that we have and look outside, which is what we're doing. We also met with the Technology Oversight Committee, which was an early meeting. They usually don't engage with projects until after we've contracted and moved forward, but we wanted to talk to them early, pre-RFP for just a review and consultation to get the Technology Oversight Committee advice as well. And then we also have a plan to consult with Gartner Technologies and BTS staff as we move forward. And what we're asking today is just council's approval to move forward with that RFP, which will allow us to then get concrete proposals from vendors, which will allow us to figure out what the actual cost is of this, and then we'll come back to you with that information before moving forward with the project.
Very good. Colleagues, I'm sorry, Commissioner Saltzman.
Well, I had asked this item be presented because I was concerned. I didn't see any reference to the Technology Oversight Committee in any of the resolution. So they have been involved and will continue to be involved.
Yes, I've requested that they continue to be involved. To be frank, the project's a little small for them. They usually engage with larger projects, but as the city budget office, we don't have a lot of technology expertise, so I am absolutely asking them to be involved, and anyone else who wants to be involved in terms of oversight of the project.
Well, we hope it will remain a small project.
Yes,
that's the trouble with software projects, is they often cross that threshold at some point and become suddenly large headaches.
Right.
So,
so we did consult with them, and they were very helpful, and we're going back to them on their October meeting.
Yes, we'll be talking with them October 23rd after they've had an opportunity to review our initial draft of the RFP and give us suggestions.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Very good. Any public testimony on this item?
We did not have a sign-up
Seeing
sheet
none,
out.
call the roll, please.
Saltzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Back to the time certain, 10:54, please.
$10.54, accept report of the 2017 Disability Leadership Academy.
Commissioner Udaley.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm very pleased to introduce the 2017 report on the Disability Leadership Academy. From February through June of this year, the City of Portland's Disability Program facilitated our 2017 Disability Leadership Academy. This was Portland's first ever city-developed, community engagement-focused Disability Leadership Academy. Its intentional recruitment of people with disabilities from diverse cultural communities, inclusion of social justice topics, and efforts to remove economic barriers to participation were also a Portland disability community first. This experience brought together 15 community community members in a cross-cultural, racially diverse, multi-generational group to learn from community leaders about disability culture and how to be part of creating the city they want to live in. The skills and knowledge gained from this experience provided members with a foundation to effectively engage in local and regional policy, educate their communities about how to create change, and advocate for vital issues in our community. The leaders that we will hear from today demonstrate through their hard work and dedication to staying involved how critical the City of Portland's efforts are in building the capacity of Portland's disability communities and moving Portland toward greater disability equity. I'm excited to welcome Joanne Johnson, Disability Program Coordinator, Vakta Gurung, Sarah Hirsey, Jerry Pati, and Cynthia Wojak up to present the report. They will also be joined by Nepali and ASL interpreters. Welcome, everyone, and please remember to state your name for the record.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner and City Council. My name is Joanne Johnson, Disability Program Coordinator for the Office of Neighborhood Involvement with the City of Portland. Disability Leadership Academy came from years of community request for a cross-disability leadership development opportunity. Portland's disability communities have long recognized that with cross-disability collaboration and leadership capacity, people with disabilities in Portland could more effectively engage in Portland's civic and community life, adding unique perspectives, ideas, and energy to our city. Disability community organizations had tried to support this kind of leadership development in the past and found that they did not have the capacity to do so. And so they asked the disability program to take it on. The City of Portland agreed that intentional disability leadership community capacity building has long-term value that benefits the entire city, and Disability Leadership Academy was funded in the 2015-2016 budget for $10,000. The remainder of the expenses were covered by the disability program. As you will soon hear, we had a very successful 2017 Disability Leadership Academy. Members of our academy are here to share with you what we did in Disability Leadership Academy and how it impacted them. I'd like to be the first to thank our City Commission for making it possible for us to offer this excellent opportunity. I know you will see today the power of this work and the gifts Portland's disability communities have to offer.
Good morning. I'm Jerry Pati. I'm a retired person and I participate on many different disability boards and groups. Here are three basic aspects of the Academy. The applicants were chosen through a competitive application and interview process, and from over 50 applications, 15 spots were filled. During the 4-month period, we met across 10 different Saturdays. Most of them were pretty tiring Saturdays. And through those, we gained basic skills, communication skills, and also we came up with a community engagement project. We also met at 4 different locations around town just to provide diversity. Those included City Hall, Independent Living Resources, Immigrant and Refugee Community Organization, and the Latino Network.
Namaste.
Hello.
मेरो नाम भक्त गुरुङ हो.
My name is Vakta Gurung.
म पोर्टल्यान्ड डिभिजनमा बस्छु.
I live in Portland City.
म मेरो वास्तव भन्नु चाहन्छु.
I'm going to tell my story.
एकटीबाट हामीले एक अर्कासँग सम्बन्ध बनायौँ र एक अर्कासँग परिचय भयौँ. हामीले एक अर्कालाई भेटेर हामी कथा सुनायौँ.
We met through Disability Leadership Academy, and we built relationship with other people in the community.
र अहिले हामी बिचमा राम्रो सम्बन्ध छ.
We build good relationship with each other now.
एकाडेमीको सदस्यहरूको रुममा म धेरै यसको मिटिङमा आएर धेरै जातिहरूको आफ्नो आफ्नो सदस्यता र अनुभवको बारेमा थाहा पाए.
I came to Leadership Academy and I learned so much and got to meet so many friends and people in my community.
मैले अमेरिकाका रिस्पबिलिटी भएका मानिसहरूको चरित्र र अमेरिकन रिस्पबिलिटी एक्टको बारेमा पनि जाने मैले थाहा पाए.
I also learned about American Disability Act.
कि मैले डिसेबिलिटी भएको मान्छेको रुममा पाएको सुविधा र अवस्थाहरू यो लामो सबैको बलिदानबाट आएको हो. म यो सचेतना गर्न सबैका समूहमा धन्यवाद दिन्छु.
Being part of the Leadership Academy, I feel very thankful, and I want to thank everyone who is involved and supported the Leadership Academy.
यतै पछि साराले बोल्ने छिन्.
So one of my friends will be speaking now.
Good morning. My name is Cynthia Wojak. I'm a retired Portland Public School teacher, and I applied to be on the committee because I'm looking for something to do with this part of my life. And I have to say that overall, it really was a wonderful experience. I'm just going to talk a minute about some of the training sessions that our leader, Joanne, put together for us. One of them was an overview of the disability movement. We saw films about the bravery and the strength of people with disabilities in fighting for important causes, and it brought back to mind some news that I just saw this week about in Washington, D.C., people with disabilities demonstrating to keep their health coverage. And that brought back some very strong movies that Joanne showed us, and that got the ball rolling for our other meetings. We had people in the community who are considered leaders in the disability movement talk with us about their own personal experiences and what we might bring to the present time. That was very powerful. We did go around town to different places, as Jerry talked about, our Hispanic community, ERCO out in Northeast Portland. We met a couple times. And we even came here, and you guys weren't here on Saturday. I don't think I saw any of you, but it's okay for this time. So we were all over the place seeing what Portland Disability Movement is doing. We looked at how to work with the city government and other local places, and trying to cut through some of all that red tape that you guys are always having to deal with. We saw a little bit of how we might work within that. That was very useful. And problem solving. We had a few meetings on actually listening That's something we, yes. We need to listen more, and we had people talk with us about how to do that effectively, how to communicate, how to problem solve, and I think we reflected on that very, very strongly. That was a high point. And then I think overall, throughout all of our meetings, meeting each other. And we're all very different people coming to different places with our disabilities, just constantly seeing that and reflecting on ourselves and what that means among our group was really very powerful. I appreciated that very, very much, and I want to thank Joanne for being our leader and working on that throughout all the meetings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello everyone. My name is Sarah Hirsi, and I'm a student at Portland State University and getting my Master of Social Work. I speak English, is my second language also. People with a disability experience intersectionality. This includes race, gender, cultural, language. We know everybody we all have multiple identity. Each of our identity can be cited for beverage or oppression. So people with a disability, we overcoming our own internally challenges. We also experience in educating our own family, leaders, community, and also educating our own, the system in everything. So before Disability Leadership Academy, I worked so hard. For me, as an English second language, I came to this country working hard. I thought I was supposed to do everything I supposed to do, and everything will go the way. Okay, so I went to the English class, get a GED, worked at BCC Community College, get a bachelor, and still have a question if this is possible for me to have opportunity to get a job or something. Because I learned through the whole process that it's not the only issue is a disability, but the issue is society, which is not, and not physical barriers, the challenges, institutional, it's the challenges, because if we're not included, because we also are really problem solver, like we know how to solve something, because when you are struggling in one area in your life, you always have to find solution to accommodate with people. So the Leadership Academy for me was very experienced to see different people who are struggling in different area in intersectionality at the same time. Awareness, like some of them was fighting for the basic thing related to the language. For example, if you are second language and arrive this country and you can hear it, you are deaf, you have to learn both language, which is the sign language and the English. And at the same time, you also have to, it's hard to even to get the basic resources. For our academy, we have a Nepal language and sign language, so the person can participate that whatever we doing it. So as the disabled community, we really want to be part of the society. We also have a lot to offer, and if you guys missing us, you're missing a lot, so we want to be included. Thank you for having this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you.
Just a couple final comments regarding our project. We linked together all of our various disabilities so that the project that we would come up with would benefit the most people. And so we've decided to work on a disability equity resolution, putting together all of our communication skills that we gained in the academy.
मेरो प्रस्ताव मैले डिसेबिलिटी रिलेटिभ एकाडेमीबाट आफ्नो डिसेबिलिटीको लागि सेवा गर्न पर्छ भनेर जाने मेरो सम्बन्धमा डिसेबिलिटी भएका मान्छेहरू सम्बन्धित हुँदैनन्।
After the Disability Leadership Academy, I learned that I need to help my community as well.
मैले सिकेँ कि हामीले अगाडि बढ्न डिसेबिलिटी भएका मान्छेहरूलाई सशक्तिकरण गर्नुपर्छ.
We need to encourage other people who have disability to do more.
स्वानले पूर्ण दिएको छन्.
So Juan will speak. Joanna.
So now each of the members of Leadership Academy will share just a couple of sentences in particular about how Disability Leadership Academy impacted them.
For me, it just started me reflecting on what I should be doing with this part of my life, and with all the information and experiences that we had, where do I go from here? So for me, I'm still looking at that, and I'm grateful for Joanne's opportunity that she gave to us.
For years, increasing needs and decreasing resources have divided the disability community rather than uniting them. So through the Leadership Academy, I was brought together with people with disabilities that I normally would not come in contact with, and it created a greater feeling of unity for me.
I have a hope in, it's possible. First, I didn't know if it's gonna happen anything because I did everything I was supposed to do it, but the Leadership Academy gave me that still if something can happen. So I have a hope now. So, and people who isolated home in second language can have the opportunity to have the education here. And I also think that I can make a change to continue what we're doing.
Thank you. अनि हाम्रो यहाँ TPS को रूपमा हामी डिसेबल विद्यार्थीहरूको लागि अगाडि बढ्दै जाने हामी प्लानसँग छलफल गरिरहनु भएकोमा मलाई खुसी लागेको छ. उहाँहरूलाई धन्यवाद.
So I want to thank you everyone here for supporting Disability Leadership Academy, and also Juan for helping us to build our leadership.
अनि हामी नेपालको डिसेबल र अमेरिकाको डिसेबल मिसेको छैन. त्यो कारणले गर्दा गाह्रो भइरहेको छ. म सँगसँगै कसरी यो गर्नुपर्छ भन्ने उहाँसँग अगाडि छलफल गरिदिनु.
So disabled person from Nepal and American person have a hard time communicating, and so in the future I hope that there's a way that we can communicate better.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Mayor, can we make a few comments before our guests leave?
I have a question.
Oh, yeah, question, go ahead.
Yes, we should have said that. Is there any questions you want to have?
This is a beautiful report. Are you still going to do the program with the stipends to be applied for so that some of the members can report back to their community and share some of the things they've learned, and then give that information to the program?
Yes, one of the things our Disability Leadership Academy members were too modest to share with you is that each of them, in different ways, have begun to be more involved and engaged in their communities after, and sometimes even during Disability Leadership Academy. We had several members get elected to the Portland Commission on Disability. We've had members serve internships in commissioners' offices, specifically Commissioner Daly. We've had members become presidents of boards. We've had members commit to educating their communities on things that they've learned in Disability Leadership Academy. I have an ongoing meeting with Vakta and another member, Durga, on different things that they want to do because they have so many ideas and want our support in implementing them. And so members did receive a stipend for being part of Disability Leadership Academy. And in my estimation, and I hope in yours, they're earning it many times over through their increased engagement in Portland, not only receiving information, but also sharing perspectives.
But you don't have the money for the ongoing post-leadership graduation to do targeted outreach? I'm just trying to figure out.
Tell me more about your question.
Well, obviously, Commissioner Fish and Commissioner Saltzman and I helped funded this program in last year's budget, and part of the way it was left when I was no longer in charge was that there would be the stipends could continue, that there would be applications to continue to be the ambassadors.
Yes.
So did that get changed?
So the structure did get changed. Kyle Moses had been the Disability Leadership Academy project coordinator prior to me, and he had a structure where people were coming in for trainings, and then after the trainings had concluded, they would go out and do a community needs assessment. Coming in last October, when Leadership Academy was initially slated to start, I realized that I really wanted to support Disability Leadership Academy and being offered to the community as soon as possible, and that I didn't yet have the relationships to be able to use resources effectively and do an accurate and useful needs assessment within a few months of arriving here in Portland. And so next year, actually, part of what Leadership Academy is going to do is they're going to be supported to have specific connections with local organizations, and they're going to be asking organizations for their disability-related data. And that data and those connections will be brought back to the Office of Neighborhood Involvement. And we are setting the foundation in future years to do a more full-scale needs assessment.
Fabulous, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Mayor, I'll hold off and just make my comment when we accept the report.
Very good. Is there any?
Are there other questions?
Very good.
अलिकति हामीलाई टिपी हलमा आएर आफ्नो कामको बारेमा बोल्न दिनु भएकोमा मेयर र कमिसनरहरूलाई धन्यवाद दिन्छु। हामी सबैजना अवसर पाए हाम्रो समाजलाई अझ धेरै सेवा गर्न सक्छौँ। हामी तपाईहरूबाट यस्तो अवसरको लागि आशा पनि गर्छु।
I would like to thank you, Portland City Mayor and Commissioner, for inviting us to share our stories and to all of you. And also, we hope that we get support, similar support in the future as well.
Very good. Is there any public testimony on this item? I'll accept a motion.
So moved. I move to accept the report.
Second.
I have a motion from Commissioner Fish, a second from Commissioner Fritz, and there is no public testimony.
We had one sign up to testify, Shedrick Wilkins.
Is Cedric still here? Oh, very good. All right, come on up.
On this item, Cedric?
Oh, yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you all. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll be voting in just a minute. Thank you.
Yes, I'm Shedrick. I do have sympathy and support for programs for the disabled. I think I was somewhat disabled in school because I wasn't fully developed as a mentally or whatever physically till I was 22. So, generally our high schools process people when they're from the ages of 14 to 18, they get scholarships, but I just wasn't with it. Maybe I had a form of autism. It's true too, just because I think I can't read very well, I listened to the radio and heard about Thomas Edison. Edison was, if he was in the 1780s, he was an inventor, light bulb and all that. He was actually had attention deficit syndrome. If he was in the school system now, he would be diagnosed with that. But for the time he quit, and he went out of school, and his mother homeschooled him, and he worked for the railroad where he learned how to be a telegraph operator, and a very good telegraph operator. He started taking telegraphs apart, and he learned how to invent things. So his disability worked to his advantage. So there are then there's a third example. So people develop at different rates. Sometimes people have obvious social disabilities and they achieve outside. Then there's a final thing about people with disabilities is Stephen Hawking, the English physicist who was a super achiever, and then when he was in his 20s, he got some form of muscular dystrophy. He had to be in a wheelchair. Hawkins did say that he actually wish he wasn't disabled, but sometimes he can internalize in his mind, he can't walk or anything, and he thinks about physics things like black holes, and he can focus more. But certainly he wishes he wasn't. He could walk like a normal person.
Thank you. Please call the roll.
Saltzman.
Well, I want to thank all the, first of all, I want to congratulate the graduates of the, this is our first academy, correct? Okay. Congratulations to our graduates. You did a great job today presenting. And I just want to really commend Commissioner Fritz, because I know she advocated for funding for this, and Commissioner Udaley, because she actually executed this academy and made it happen. And it looks like it's really, it's very important work to empower people with disabilities to change our society for the better. So I appreciate the work you're going to do and the work you have done. Thank you. Aye.
Udaley.
Well, before I launch into my long list of thank yous, I just want to really emphasize something that I may have glossed over in my opening remarks, which is how unique and innovative this program was in bringing together people across multiple disabilities. In the disability community, we often experience, isolation, because the general public doesn't necessarily understand the unique needs and challenges we face, but often groups are separated. So the academy included people with physical disabilities, intellectual disabilities, neurological differences, people who experience mental health issues. And as Jerry mentioned, I think that was just a vitally important aspect, because together you represent a sizable group of people, and I really hope moving forward we continue that tradition. So first I want to congratulate the participants and just thank you for all the hard work you put into completing this program and for all the hard work you're going to be carrying out in our community. Special thanks to everyone who presented today. I know there was a tremendous amount of time and effort put into the report, so I want to recognize a few specific individuals, starting with Sarah, who interned in our office this summer and was a wonderful addition to my staff, and is someone I really look forward to continuing working with, particularly around how to make the city of Portland a more welcoming and inclusive employer for people with disabilities. So thank you again, Sarah. Of course, Joanne Johnson, our disability program coordinator. She worked very hard to pull this all together, including developing the program and the curriculum, coordinating and conducting the selection process for participants, facilitating the sessions before and after the trainings, and providing ongoing support for our new disability community leaders in their engagement work. So thank you very much, Joanne. I also want to thank former project coordinator Kyle Moses, as well as the Equity Policy and Commission on Disability coordinator Nicole Sharon, for laying the vital groundwork for the Leadership Academy to begin with. There were several community contributors who volunteered their expertise to the Academy to enrich the learning around disability culture and activism. These include, but I'm sure are not limited to, LaVon Heister, Ian Jaquist, Jan Campbell, and Barbara Dirks, Kyle Moses and Todd Ray, and Renee, I'm not sure if it's Bove or Bove. Nobody? Okay. Well, Renee, hopefully I got one of those was right. And Keela Johnson, Celeste Carey, Jerry Jimenez, and Ann Casper Having the last name Udaly, I'm rather sensitive to names being pronounced correctly. Not to my own, though. You can say it however you want, as long as you say it. Finally, well, I want to thank the past council for recognizing the importance of this program and for funding it and all your hard work in getting it established. And finally, our wonderful staff at ONI, I want to thank you all for contributing your time, energy, and skills to helping to make the Academy a huge success. Aye.
Fritz.
Well, it's wonderful to see what you've done with this inaugural program. It's really succeeded beyond my wildest dreams, and I hope it continues. Thank you to Commissioner Udaly for stewarding it and having the passion for it that I do as well. I want to thank Brian Hoop, who will be leaving ONI shortly, and Brian, for all your work in the community, the neighbourhood involvement system. Over many years, you've taught me so much. I really appreciate it, and it's not surprising that you're an integral part of this programme as well. So thank you. Joanne, you're doing amazing work, and I'm very happy to see you flourishing. I also appreciate how many community events I see you at. And Patrick Philpott in the Office of Equity and Human Rights, who helps with the disability newsletter. I don't even know if he's still employed by the city. I know he retired once, but maybe he does that on his own time now. Once you get involved in this program, the people who are part of the program make you want to just continue to be involved. I've learned so much from the Portland Commission on Disability. I'm so happy that we now have a cadre, the first cohort of graduates from this program who will then be informing city decision-making, being appointed to various commissions, not only the Commission on Disability, and continue to advise us. The way that you do it in so gracious and helpful and inclusive. I can't remember another time at council when we've had somebody who had a voice interpreter for the language and a sign language interpreter so that he could hear responses in real time. That's what Portland's supposed to look like. That's what we're supposed to be providing as a city government, is opportunities for everybody to be included, for everybody's voice to be heard, whether that voice is spoken or signed or just a smile or a frown as far as whether things are going well or not. So thank you very much, everybody who's involved in this. Aye.
Fish.
Well, there's nothing I can add to the beautiful words of my colleagues other than to thank Amanda and Chloe for their leadership. Thank all those who have brought this Academy forward. Thank the first graduates of the Academy. And colleagues, I was struck, and I apologize, but it was the second person in the sequence wearing the striped shirt, ma'am, who was testifying. And she talked a little bit about the power of the disability rights movement in Washington, D.C., and their efforts to stop Graham Cassidy. And I think it's worth reflecting that that really did get a lot of attention. People were forcibly removed from a Senate hearing room. There was a big ruckus. And the reason I think we should acknowledge that, and I'm so glad you did, is that that legislation would have given the states so-called flexibility to go backwards on pre-existing condition laws. And the great reform in Obamacare was we would not tell people with a pre-existing condition that they had to pay more. We created an equitable system. And that would fall, and 19 states refused the Medicaid money. So for those who had confidence in the states fashioning a system that was fair on pre-existing condition, I think the disability rights movement understood what was at stake. Whether you are disabled, whether you are alive today because every day you take almost a miracle drug because you're HIV positive, but you have a drug that allows you to function, whether you're suffering from MS, whether you have cancer. No matter what the challenge you face, the idea that this country was going to leave it to the states to determine how much you pay for your health care on pre-existing condition was appalling. And we owe a great debt of gratitude to the disability rights movement for framing that issue so effectively. So thank you, colleagues, and I'm pleased to accept the report. Aye.
Wheeler.
Great work, everybody. Aye. And the report is accepted. I want to just acknowledge the young people who are filing out. This is this the Jewish Academy?
Yes, it is.
Excellent. Well, so how was your visit today? It was good. It was good. There no free ice cream in the city hall chambers, though. Well, it's good to see
in my
you.
office.
Yeah. Yes, to stop by Commissioner Udaley's.
What grade, teacher?
Just making the rounds. You've had all sorts of candy around.
Third graders.
Well-behaved third graders.
Excellent. Yeah, it's nice to have you here. Come back. Thank you.
Very much.
So, colleagues, we're going to dispose of a number of the next items relatively quickly. Please call 1055 and 1056.
1055, consider the proposal of Sarah Radley of Strata Land Use Planning and the recommendation from the hearings officer for approval to change the comprehensive plan map designation from low-density multi-dwelling to neighborhood commercial and the zoning map designation from residential 2000 to neighborhood commercial 1 for the property at 5901 Southeast Belmont Street.
Colleagues, may I have a motion to accept the hearing officer's recommendation and approve the changes to the comprehensive plan map and zoning map?
So moved.
We have a motion.
I'll second that.
And we have a second from Commissioner Udaley. Please call the vote. Call the roll.
Salzman, Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish. Wheeler.
Aye. The motion to accept the hearing officer's recommendation is passed 3-0 and the application is approved. Now the council will vote on the ordinance to amend the comprehensive plan map designation and amend the zoning map. Please call the roll.
And that's item 1056.
Correct.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The amendment is therefore made. Why don't you read 1066? I'm pulling it back, but do you need to read it first?
Oh, okay. Amend the comprehensive plan map designation and amend the zoning map.
No, I'm sorry, 1066.
Oh, 1066.
Yeah, we've moved on. Sorry.
Excellent. Amend contract with Enviro Issues in the amount of $35,000 to provide additional police review board facilitator services.
Colleagues, I'm pulling this back to the mayor's office. 1067.
Authorize a contract with Squire Patton Boggs, U.S. LLP for federal lobbying.
This is a second reading of a non-emergency ordinance. Please call the roll.
Salzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. And with Commissioner Fish's agreement, we will bypass 1068 and 1069 for now and go to item 1070, please.
Item 1070, authorize a grant agreement with All Hands Raised for $194,940 for the Cradle-to-Career Partnership to provide the framework, coaching, and tools that empower schools and organizations to improve educational outcomes for more than 220,000 children and youth.
Colleagues, as you know, I serve on the All Hands Raised Council. The City of Portland and the Portland City Council has been a very important partner to this effort. So today we're going to give you a brief update. I'll be participating in this brief update, and I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Dan Ryan with All Hands Raised. I'm the CEO.
Michael Birch, Northwest Regional Council of Carpenters, and a board member.
So I serve with Dan and Michael. We are three members of a much larger board. And Dan, are you the genius working the overhead today?
I am now.
Fantastic, because you don't want me even attempting it. So from the beginning of the work, as you can see, we've had a focus on what I describe as holistic support from kids going from cradle to career, and we've embraced a county-wide focus. Currently, what you see on this particular slide, it's a snapshot of the entire population of young people from 0 to 24 years of age in Multnomah County. If you take a deeper look at the demographics of our school districts, PPS is home, Portland Public Schools, sorry, is home to about half the county's students, but we have other critical partners, including Centennial, David Douglas, Parkrose, Reynolds, all in the city of Portland. And of course, Gresham Barlow is also part of this partnership. As you know, East County districts have all seen rapid increases in students of color and immigrant and refugee families. And as families chase housing affordability eastward, poverty is also shifting eastward. Countywide, more than half of our students are low income, half are students of color, and about 1/4 are English language learners. The work started with identifying the measurable outcomes that effectively will lift more students into successful lives and good careers. The organization All Hands Raise regularly publishes data on these metrics. You'll see how we're doing on each item in the Chapter 3 publication in your seat. I'm sorry that the slide is a little bit difficult to read, but you can actually go through each of those areas. From the very beginning, we have explicitly prioritized racial equity in education as being our top goal. So throughout the document, you'll see data is broken down by race. The disparities, unfortunately, are stark, as we know, but we can't look away from those disparities, and the data helps anchor the conversations that we need to have. The flags that you'll see over the various indicators indicate the bodies of work that we've launched to improve these specific outcomes. One of the most interesting charts in the document from my perspective is this one. And again, I'm sorry on the overhead, it is very, very hard to see. It shows where we are on every indicator when we first launched this work compared with where we actually are today. Some progress has clearly been made, and in other areas, frankly, we remain stuck. A bright spot is our rising graduation rates. Improving graduation rates was the main rallying point that got this whole partnership going in the first place. The good news, since our baseline year, we're up about 9 percentage points, and the gaps impacting kids of color continue to narrow. This is due to a collective effort by teachers, school leaders, nonprofits, government programs, and private sector leaders working together. I'm now going to hand it over to Dan, and he'll help explain how All Hands Raise helps to manage our collective efforts. Dan, thanks for being here today. We appreciate
absolutely.
it.
Thank you, Mayor Wheeler. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you for your public service. And it was November 30th, 2010, when there were two groups, Leaders Roundtable, they've been meeting for 28 years, and then the Mayor's Education Task Force decided to dissolve, merge, and birth the All Hands Raise partnership. The goal was to build a long-term table, and I'm proud to say that we've survived, well, there's a better way to say this. We have thrived through 3 mayors. I didn't do my math on the amount of commissioners. I apologize for that. 17 superintendents later, the table is stronger than ever. And that alone is a big feat, because we had a tendency in this great city of ours to build a new table about every 2 years. And that's kind of crazy. And so it's just been great that we've been able to sustain that effort. We knew that this work would be new and different. So if you look at the slide, you can see this area called middle space. And the reason why we focused on that is because we have a lot of great services, direct service organizations, and also our teachers are educating the kids in the classrooms. We provide shelter for people for homeless families. And then we have the Big P policy at the top, where you all do your due diligence work with Big P policy. But there's this vast world just below Big P policy and just above traditional direct service. And that's where All Hands Raised tends to live. You can think about it this way. How many times have policies been passed, but we seldom have the systemic efforts to implement them to fidelity? And so that's an area where we continue to show up. And you also can think about it in other ways as well. But the middle space is an opportunity for us to just thrive in building this system that I now put up in front of you. Okay, so after about 20 revisions of this, because there's no blueprint for this, we're actually one of 70 sites around the country. And just a little boastful Portland moment, next week is the gathering of the Cradle-to-Career sites in Phoenix, and we are being featured as the ones that have come up with what they are calling a very innovative systemic change, because we really want to build the system from the bottom up. So if you look at this civic infrastructure, which we call it, you'll notice there are community, school community sites that are at the bottom, and that is where the innovation begins. Too many of our reforms, our efforts, our improvements start at the top down, and they seldom ever land in the classroom, and the teachers seldom experience it. So it's very important for us to have the teacher voice at the table, the counselor voice at the table, and the social worker at the table. Another thing that I'm very proud of is the integration of the community partners working with the school communities. Too often we'll pass contracts where there's a son contract in the school so they can take care of the kids after school. But what really matters is the relationship between that school community group and their personnel with the principal and the school community. So we've helped integrate those relationships so decisions are being made collectively. What we do is we look at data. We don't do lagging data. We work at getting data that's looks at the child that's it's November, and we want to know what's happening in November of that year, as opposed to waiting for a year to look at it. It's not perfect, but it's coming from them. A lot of this work is about building capabilities on the ground with those sites so that they can be empowered to eventually be the ones that will spread the practices upward. So where do these where do we do this work? It's throughout the county, but throughout the city, actually. Most of it is in the city, and it's in the far east part of the city and the far north. That's where most of our sites are concentrated. We concentrate them at school communities, and we do that because we're basically an education intermediary, and we know that the schools can't do it alone, but we want to bring the community groups to the schools to build this intelligence. And when the mayor talked about the flags, and where we have our work, I'm going to quickly go through the different areas of work. And if some of you know me, it's really hard for me not to tell a story about each one, but because of time, I will go through this, and you'll see in Chapter 3 there's some great stories. Starting with racial education equity, we have seen tremendous results, and one that I'm already doing it. So one story is, if you look at a school out in David Douglas, they were looking at actually the difference between boys and girls. It was a gender difference in referrals. And so, novel idea, they decided to add 10 minutes of movement every day. I'm the youngest of 7 brothers, and my mom knew that you had to run your kids before dinner. It's not a big earth-shattering, this is radical common sense work, trust me. And so but the good news is we implemented it after a false implementation. We found out only 20% of the teachers were doing it. We did a survey, we did a professional development day. 3 months later, all of the teachers are doing it, and we saw a 46% decrease in referrals. Kindergarten transition.
There's a number of community events where we could learn from the teachers. How do you get everybody to settle down again after that 10 minutes?
Do a movement exercise prior. Yeah, that's a good idea. Kindergarten transition works, takes some of our Head Start programs and actually helps integrate those relationships with the kindergarten communities in their neighborhood. Too often parents experience a real shocking transition from their Head Start where they feel welcomed, and then they go to the traditional school and it's jarring for them. Attendance is another area where we have sites, and I think on this one it's not too surprising that all roads lead to trauma. The kids want to come to school. It's a really good day for them when they arrive at school, but there's conditions, there's factors, whether it's housing insecurity, food insecurity, domestic violence, drug abuse, all of that. So we're really going below the iceberg to work with our community partners to provide more mental health supports in that conversation. 9th grade transition, this is what really kicked the graduation rate up. We know that the data says if a child in 8th grade, if a student in 8th grade is having attendance problems, is not doing well in their math courses, there's a really strong indication that they will not graduate from high school. And so we've targeted those kids to be involved in a summer program called 9th Grade Counts. Post-secondary access is where we now are launching into our work, and we started with doing the FAFSA, the federal aid forms, and we've seen a really big uptick in 14 points in Multnomah County, and the state's actually leading the nation on FAFSA upgrades, and we'd like to think that as goes Multnomah County, so goes the state. Sometimes it's really wonderful to say that, right?
What does the 14 points refer to? You said,
pardon me?
You say up 14 points.
Yeah.
What's
up?
Yeah,
it means that 14% more students are filling out their FAFSA forms.
Okay.
Yeah. And particularly focused on communities of color and those with English language learning. Yeah.
But for the record, that was the most difficult form I have ever filled out. So I think it really can benefit everybody to get the tutorial on how to do it.
Commissioner Fritz, we've heard that over and over again from folks, that it's hard enough for somebody that has a college degree that speaks English to fill out the form. Imagine what a lot of our first-generation families go through.
I'm glad you're providing that support. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to turn it over to the Vice Chair of the Board, Michael Birch, to talk about our other work in post-secondary.
So, Mayor, Commissioners, thank you for having us here today, and I appreciate the work that you've done with All Hands Raised. This is the last work that I'll talk about, and I'm really passionate about this piece. Of course, I've been here before under different circumstances, but of course, pathways are the important part. You get kids to school, you have them listen, figure out what they're going to do, and typically, the trades are not part of the discussion. College is part of the discussion, absolutely. Well, actually, college is the only discussion that kids are hearing about today, and we know that 80% of our kids aren't going to college. So the education case is clear, as the data at the top shows. When kids get hands-on relevant education, their graduation rates soar. I mean, all the data that we've collected over the years indicates that if you have a kid, as Dan said, if they're active, they settle down. If they have some physical activity, they settle down. And it also shows that if kids have the opportunity to work with their hands in a class, maybe the only class that they really enjoy, they need the others, but they enjoy this, their graduation rates go up. About that, there's no question. So that's why All Hands Raised is on the ground working with these schools, these three schools, Benson, Centennial, and Reynolds High School, to strengthen their programs and build better hands-on, hands-off, to build better hands-on to post-secondary, handoffs, excuse me, to post-secondary training. And of course, it's an economic imperative for us to grow our own talent to fill the available family wage jobs we have right here. We have a huge need. Construction, manufacturing, is indicated by the boxes above. We have, in my industry alone, 45% of our workforce is 50 and older. They have a lot of knowledge and wisdom that they need to share before they leave, and we are basically hunting down people who want to do what we do for a living, what the craft people do for a living, because I wasn't allowed to come up through the trades. I went to Benson, sidebar, went to Benson, spent 4 years in the construction class. Mr. Hoffman was my instructor. Mrs. Lanning was my counselor. After 4 years building houses for the Benson Tech Show, I was told I could not become a carpenter's apprentice. I was told I needed to go join the military or become a janitor in the federal building right across the street from Benson. I remember their names. I don't remember my classmates' names from high school. So you know they scarred me deeply with that information. Just sorry, can't do it. And I had good grades. So what we're talking about here today is something that's vitally important to me, vitally important to the students that go to school today. They need an opportunity to be exposed to the trades and to actually be handed off to an industry that will support them. And we know 80% of our kids aren't going to college. So I got off track there. All Hands Raised leaders identified construction and manufacturing as its initial focus because of the strong projected growth, which we see above, and the silver tsunami of retirements that are already rocking these industries. I think it's 20,000 baby boomers a day are retiring across the industry, across all crafts and trades. I think I've shared enough on that. Beyond working with career technical programs, we're also working to break down the stereotypes and stigma attached to careers in the trades. For too long, there's been a college-only mentality that has been a barrier to kids even knowing about these jobs that are out there. So over the past 2 years, we've taken more than 200 local teachers, counselors, and school leaders out to get a glimpse of the reality of these jobs and opportunities they hold for their students. The feedback and the measurable impact of these immersion experiences has been huge. We have held 2 Industry for a Day events at PNCR, our training center, and Leatherman Tool Company, 2 sites the first year, and there were about 50 participants from area school superintendents and principals. The second year we did it, there were 18 sites?
Yes.
18 sites, and I believe about 150 participants. The most common comment was, we had no idea you spent this kind of money on training. The stereotype is if you can't do anything else, you go into the trades. That has never been true, and it's certainly not true today. We have articulated agreements where they acquire credits for attending the training programs. They get paid. It's one of the oldest forms of on-the-job training there is. And we spend the carpenters alone spend over $200 million a year on training. The impact was not lost. The impact of the training, the money we spend on training, was not lost on the participants. One in particular, the superintendent of Centennial at the time, on his way out the takeaway that Nate asked for, he said there needs to be a paradigm shift. Everyone who works in a high school that teaches, counsels, leads groups, has a college degree, and now we have to talk to them about coaching kids around not going to college, but doing something worthwhile, earning while they learn, and lifelong learning.
Michael, could you remind us, because I was out at the NECA IBEW trade fair for young women, girls actually, high school kids, and I stopped at some of the vendors, and I mean, one of the things that struck me is these are high-wage jobs with benefits. So these are careers where these young people over time could make $75, $80, or more $1,000 a year with benefits, right?
Correct.
I mean, every time I get a bill from a plumber, I'm reminded I may have taken a wrong turn in my career, but and you've said there's this silver tsunami, so there's a huge opportunity for people to go into these things. But your idea of pathways is making sure that young people are connected to the opportunity.
Correct. Young people don't know about them. Through Principal for a Day in 9th grade counts, we go into schools. I spent my first principal for almost a day in a middle school where we asked the kids, do you even know what the trades are? They had no clue. They didn't think about choosing one of the trades when they got to high school as an elective because they had no idea what they were.
And one of the ironies in this, of course, is I'm reminded Commissioner Udaley and I were at a town hall a little while ago with the maker movement people. It's filled with young people that like to make things.
Right.
Well, same family, and yet they're struggling because it's hard to make a living in Portland just being a maker. You don't get all the benefits and other things.
Right, right. And after 4 years in an apprenticeship program, you can make between $80,000 and $100,000, and that's for the unlicensed trades. Plus, you have benefit, medical, dental, and health coverage, and a retirement plan. So, what we need to do is to talk more about the options and let kids choose. First, they need a solid education. They need to be able to stay in school. They need not to be suspended at higher rates, and this is across the board. They need to feel valued in the classroom, and then they need to be exposed to options, and then let them choose where they go.
Thank you.
I will just add, the All Hands Raised board and also the Leadership Council has university presidents and people from the trades and construction. So it's not an either or, it's an and both. And if you look at the data, you'll see a lot of students that meander. They'll go to community college, then maybe they'll do the trades. Then they can go on and get their engineering degree maybe in their 30s. So it's very important not to be linear or literate about this. It's just, it's a blend. But I think the stigma in the high schools that we learned about when we were building this was the superintendents and principals admitted that most of the teachers just didn't see these kids. They didn't know about this pathway because their life experience was not about that. And so it was important to bring this awareness. That's why Industry for a Day focused on teachers. We realized that's the audience that we needed to bring along.
And it's not either or, which is oftentimes how, it's not college or the trades. That's oftentimes how it's portrayed, but it's not. You take classes. I mean, carpenters take classes once every 3 months. The licensed trades take more classes. You cannot dumb down and become a tradesperson today. Just doesn't work. This next slide shows all of the participants in the Industry for a Day. And if anyone's here in the room that participated in that, I'd like to acknowledge you. And with that,
I just wanted to conclude the remarks by saying that in 2010, our first big investment did come from the city, and it was a very big investment of $200,000, which was 24% of our budget. I'd like to proudly say that 7 years later, the investment has been consistent, and yet it represents less than 10% of our budget, and we now have over 700 donors. I think it's really good government when public investments leverage private support, and we can see what we've been building here. And we're proud to represent the city of Portland and Multnomah County in the national network, where we get to talk about this innovative reversing the flow of the river and building something from the bottom up, from the ground up, reversing the flow of the river. So practices can come from those that are actually doing the work. And I just want to thank you all for being the biggest investor to get us started and sustaining the support for this good work. And I speak on behalf of many, 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 many participants across the county. Oh, there was a slide that showed everything that I was saying. Yeah.
So thank you, Dan and Michael, for the presentation. Colleagues, this is obviously about partnerships. And while this particular action today is a grant agreement, I also just want to extend an invitation. I know all of us at one point or another have done the Principal for a Day program. Commissioner Fish, I think you do this every year.
Yes.
As a regular. They have a program that they're inviting us to participate in and inviting the public to participate in called Principal for Almost a Day, recognizing that we live in very busy times. So there is a flyer in your materials if you'd like to join us all for that opportunity. Thank you, folks. I don't know if you have any further questions for Dan or Michael.
Mayor, I'd just like to say I was very excited about Principal for Almost a Day until I realized it's actually a job shadow. They don't give you control of the school. So I'm having second thoughts.
That's class. You can negotiate that.
Yeah, I was going to say, maybe, depends on the principal, maybe.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for your remarks, Michael.
Very good.
Yeah.
Is there any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Very good. Please call the roll.
Saltzman.
Well, thank you for a good report. I've been around All Hands Race since its inception, and it seems like it's really taking shape. I will confess I am an MIT graduate, and I had trouble following some of those graphs, so I've never said that before, so maybe work on the graphics a little bit more to make them a little more intelligible. But good work. You're doing good work, and that's really what counts. And you've really got good buy-in from a lot of organizations and individuals that weren't there at the start. So I'm happy to see that we're only now 1/10 of your budget. That's good news. So anyway, good job. Aye.
Udaley.
Well, thank you for the presentation, and I just want to share with you that you have someone sitting in front of you who could have greatly benefited from these programs. I was an accelerated learner growing up in a very challenging home situation and left home and joined the workforce at age 16. I thought that my pathway to higher education had ended forever. There was no clear route into the trades, even though half the men in my family were in the trades. It was the 1980s, and the girls didn't go into those fields. Yeah. So I worked a series of the kinds of low-wage jobs that someone without a high school diploma or college degree has available to them. Luckily, I eventually found the wherewithal and resources to start my own business. But at age 40, during the recession, the business was not faring too well, and I applied to enter the carpentry program at Oregon Tradeswomen. And amazingly passed the math test. But my counselor actually suggested that I go to college instead, which is a little ironic, but I did. And, well, eventually I ended up here. So I just want to express my support and appreciation, especially for the focus on the trades. One last little story I'll share is last year I was invited for the first and what may have been the last time to Grant High School Career Day, because I was one of very few people that stood up in that room and said that college is not necessarily, isn't necessarily necessary or isn't necessarily the right route for every single student. I felt that it was important to share for those students in the room who may not have those opportunities, that not going to college is not necessarily a life sentence of struggle and economic hardship. The other people who were there who stood up and said something similar were from Boeing, where you can apprentice as a high school student and leave high school and enter, I think, a $45 an hour job, which is more than I ever made before joining City Council. So thank you again. Aye.
Fritz.
Well, thank you for being here and for giving us such a great report. Thank you for your community engagement. It was good seeing you at the Open League fundraiser last night. We've all got to work together. Actually, I always thought it should be titled Conception to Career, because there's a lot of evidence that shows that even prior to conception, there are things you can do to promote healthy outcomes. And so not included in the report was about the partnerships we have with the public health folks, and obviously that's something that you do and that we all need to bear in mind as we continue to try and have a healthy community. Thank you very much for your work. Aye.
Fish.
Well, I'm very proud of this partnership that we've supported over the years, and obviously the results speak for themselves. I actually had a different comment on your report. I wondered whether you did it in-house or outside, because it's so beautifully put together.
Yeah, it's a team effort, but we do work with one.
Okay. Well, and that handsome guy you have on the handsome guy you put on the cover just makes the whole thing, just ties it together. I have had a chance to do a lot of the principals for Almost a Day. I think they changed it to Almost a Day because it turns out being a principal is so exhausting. It's like by the time we get to lunch, we're all just completely pooped. But I will say, Dan, I think the genius of this program that you've done for local leaders is that most of us learn best when we see. I'm a visual learner. And you could give me all the reports in the world, but it won't be the same as actually what I witnessed. And being in an elementary school in Outer East and talking to a high-performing principal who's been given a really tough hand and learning from her that her biggest challenge is a majority of her kids are traumatized and don't come to school ready to learn. Well, that's just a showstopper. I mean, it's just an unbelievable thing when you hear that and you see highly motivated teachers, gifted leaders. Everyone want to do the right thing, but kids aren't coming to school in the framework to learn because of the trauma. And that is heartbreaking. But we appreciate your work, and I'm very proud that this mayor has picked up the baton and continuing the partnership. And thank you for your service. Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye, the ordinance is adopted. Thank you. So we've had some very patient city employees waiting on our last two.
I think we can do 1068, 1069 together, and we can probably do it in an abbreviated way, Mayor.
Perfect. Can you read 68 and 69, please?
1068, accept bid of Emery & Sons Construction Group for the Slough Outfall 104B project for $2,710,128. And 1069, accept bid of James W. Fowler Company for the citywide sewer rehabilitation project for $8,925,000.
So Larry, can you do both together? And we have Scott Gibson in the audience. Scott, if there are any questions, and I'll turn it over to you.
Yes, I can. Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. Wow. Push that over there. 1068 is Emery & Sons. I'll go through this really quick. It is the procurement report for Emery & Sons. Their bid is $2,710,128 as read. All they are, we're 5.3% over the engineer's estimate, which given many of the market conditions lately isn't really too far out of whack. The participation is a little bit low at 6.4%. And Emery & Sons is a non-certified firm, but they are fully licensed to do business in the city of Portland. If any follow-up questions, I can take those. 1069, it's a procurement report recommending contract with Fowler and J.W. Fowler Company for the sewer rehab project, $8,925,000. The original engineer's estimate on this one was $7.8 million. This is 12.6% over, but it is a long-term project. So there's some compensation in there for probable cost increases. There's a total of $1.8 million, a little over 20% in certified firm participation. Fowler is a non-certified firm, but they are fully licensed to do business in the city. Any questions about those?
Larry, I have a question for you. Is Emery & Sons in the room?
Emery & Sons is in the room.
Why don't, gentlemen, since you took the time, why don't you come forward for a second, if that's okay, Mayor?
Sure. Come on up.
Gentlemen, thank you for being here. And we have a staff recommendation going through our normal process to accept this procurement report. But as Mr. Palat has noted, the numbers on our DMW ESB utilization are a little lower than we'd like. And I guess the question I would pose to you is your perspective on that, and are there things that we can do in partnership to boost those numbers in the future?
I'll speak first. I'm Dan Johnston with Emery & Sons, and this is Lance Greaves with Emery & Sons. We bid the project as a low bid contractor, and we took, I think we solicited 40 firms in this particular project, and out of that 40 firms, we had 7 that responded. Out of the 7 that responded, we used 4 of them. Unfortunately, it didn't total up to the 20% that we're looking for. One of the bigger numbers that we received was from a minority contracting or a concrete company. Their bid was about $500,000 more than what we wanted or what we could perform it for. But we're willing to look at some of those numbers and increase our participation. We have some room for perhaps some trucking or things we can look at, but we're willing to review those.
This council has been pretty consistent that they view this part of our contracting as very important because we're expanding opportunity to people. And obviously, your company does great work, and you get your fair share of contracts, and we appreciate that. There may be things that we can do at the city to help, in which case I hope you'll work with procurement. We'd also ask you to take affirmative steps in your own company to build those relationships with some of the emerging minority contractors, subcontractors. Maybe they're struggling a little bit because they don't have access to capital. Maybe they don't have, they're not under an umbrella insurance policy. Maybe they don't have enough projects lined up so that their cost structure on one is higher. You may actually be in a position to help us meet the citywide goals. And I wanted to just call out this number because it is disappointing, but I'd like to offer a friendly challenge as you continue to bid on this work that we work together to boost those numbers.
Sure.
Commissioner Fritz?
I'm just wondering what you're doing to boost your own company's employment of women and minorities.
I'm sorry, I can't hear very well.
I'm interested in what your company is doing to employ women and minorities within your company.
We have an open policy. I think our staff, I'm honestly not sure we have in the office, I bet it's 50-50 between men and women. The field, not so much. We do entertain or offer that opportunity for anybody to work for us. The problem now that we see is with the gentlemen before us, they're just not in the workforce. But we do use with NUCA to try to hire the outfits.
NUCA IBW?
Yeah, Northwest College of Construction, we go.
And do you ever contact Oregon tradeswomen to see if they've got graduates coming out that could be working on your projects?
That'd be Lance's.
I never have done that, no.
I would suggest that might be another way to help meet the overall goals, which is to make sure, as you just heard, that everybody has opportunities for high-paying jobs. I would suspect that probably your office staff would get paid less than those in the field. And there are graduates coming on board who, with the right mentoring and promoting can be a great asset to your company.
We had a couple intern this last summer from Oregon State, a woman intern, so learning our trade as well. And
I know through the solicitation process on this, in addition to the subcontractors, I did send solicitations to OWAMI, the Metropolitan Contractor Partnership Small Business Association. Just sent them the same solicitation I sent everyone else to make their members aware of the opportunity as well.
Well, I'm not going to make this a part of whatever the council action, but would you gentlemen make a commitment to this council, should you be chosen for this work, to follow up with the procurement office just to review your current efforts and to brainstorm ways that you might be able to boost your efforts in future contract solicitations?
Sure.
Mr. Platt, could you then have that conversation with them?
Absolutely, Commissioner. We have some, as you are well aware, we have some pretty gifted outreach people in our organization, and we would be happy to do whatever we can do to increase the percentage.
Yeah, and I think, you know, the results are going to speak for themselves. Your Emery and Sons Construction Group is from time to time selected to do work, and so the next time there's a contract, we'll look a little closer at those numbers, and we'll ask you if we're making progress. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here.
Okay, thank you.
Very good. Before I accept motions, is there any public testimony on either of these items?
No other sign up.
I'll accept a motion, please, to accept the bid of Emery and Sons Construction Group.
Second.
We have a motion and a second on 1068. Call the roll on 1068.
Salzman.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Thank you for being here and for your time this morning. Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The report's accepted. I'll accept a motion on 1069.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to accept the report. Please call the roll.
Salzman.
Aye.
Udaly.
Aye.
Fritz.
Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The report's accepted. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And long last, the patient city treasurer sitting in the back of the room calculating time equals money. Please call item number 1071.
Item 1071, authorize a competitive solicitation for banking services for a 5-year contract period at an estimated cost of $800,000.
Mayor, Jennifer has asked me to offer an amendment. Given the delay in this coming forward, the cost has now jumped to $850,000. She would ask that we put an emergency clause on it.
Very good. We have a motion to put an emergency clause. I'm sorry. Okay, I got the first half of the joke and then I missed the second half. That's just embarrassing. Even Jamie's over there heckling me from the audience.
It's been that kind of day.
This is awful.
She's a good audience.
Colleagues, I'm just going to move along. City code requires the city to periodically and competitively solicit for the services we use. This ensures that the city's procurements are fair, efficient, effective, accountable, and completely without humor. The city relies on banking services to facilitate its daily financial operations, receiving tax payment and utility bill payments, paying our vendors, issuing payroll, and the like. This ordinance will authorize Treasury to solicit for banking services since the city's current contract is due to expire in July of 2018. Good morning, or good afternoon now, actually, and if you could state your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Jennifer Cooperman, City Treasurer. So as the mayor explained, this is our periodic competitive solicitation for banking services. Banking services refers to all of our depository accounts and services, all of our disbursement services, activities in the branch, online account access and reporting, and anything else that might come along related to banking. This is intended to be an RFP for 5 years worth of services, and we look forward to your approval for issuing the RFP.
Colleagues, any questions?
I have one question.
Fish.
We've had a debate in prior years about how to gauge, how to evaluate some of these applications in terms of banks that are good community partners. One way I think we do it is we look at their Community Reinvestment Act participation, There's some others. Could you give us a flavor of some of those factors that you will be evaluating as you screen potential bank partners?
Absolutely. Every year that I have been at the city, the RFPs that we have issued have allocated 20 points out of 100 points for corporate responsibility. And those type of questions look at the Community Reinvestment Act score. That's actually in a different section this year. I'm putting it into the organization section. But then it looks at the type of activity, financial activity that these institutions engage in the local community, the City of Portland, the Portland MSA, and the state of Oregon. How much their activity, their corporate responsibility is towards those local communities, what the dollar lending portfolio looks like in affordable housing, what it looks like to deal with, offer services for the unbanked population, et cetera. I will be asking a question, heads up everyone who's listening from the banking world, about foreclosure activity. As you know, the city has more actively pursued foreclosures for outstanding city liens, and there have been banks who have had nexuses to properties on the city's foreclosure list. I'll be asking about that. So that's the nature of the
Thank you, that's enormously helpful. Is it your professional opinion that we've got it weighted correctly, that 20% is the appropriate weight?
I certainly wouldn't go any less than 20%, but at the beginning of the day, the majority of the emphasis does need to be on the ability of the institution to do the work that we are asking them to do. And I believe that that's close to 50% of the points that I have to award. Then there is the integrity of the organization itself. So there are more questions this year about the regulatory experience of these institutions and the fines and the sanctions that they may have received over the last number of years. And then there is pricing.
So that makes sense. And my final question is, could a bank get a dismal ranking on the 20% weighted portion, a stellar ranking on everything else, and still qualify for our work? Or is that effectively a disqualification?
The last time we went to RFP in 2012, there was a respondent who answered NA for the, if not all, certainly the majority of the corporate responsibility questions. They did not make it to the finalist round. So it is, I think it is weighted appropriately, and institutions who have dealt with us in the last 5 years know that we take it seriously.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Very good, colleagues. Any further questions? Is there any public testimony on this item?
No one signed up.
Very good. Please call the roll. Commissioner Saltzman
I just
had
had
a
one
question.
question. The credit union issue. I know in the past we've wanted to get credit unions involved, and what was the reason why they can't? Or can they?
They can.
Okay.
They could. I'm not, and so the credit union issue went back to 2010 when the credit unions were approaching actually the state treasury to be included in the state's collateralization framework for public deposits. Credit unions are now part of that framework, and we do make deposits and have long-term deposits with credit unions as part of our responsible banking efforts that came out of the Occupy movement. There is, we again, going back to the ability to perform the services that we are looking for, we don't typically see credit unions with the panoply of services that we ask for, but certainly if they offer those services, they're absolutely able to bid on those services.
So they're fully eligible to respond
They're fully
to this
eligible.
RFP
It's a question of the services that we are asking for. We transact thousands of transactions over the course of the year, hundreds of thousands of transactions. We subscribe to various fraud control measures. We look for internal controls. We look for all sorts of things to protect our money. And if any institution that's able to deliver those services is certainly able to bid.
Okay.
That's incredible. They must have had a
Smart
really,
treasurer.
really smart treasurer. Yeah, they must
a really
have.
far-sighted treasurer we had.
Yeah. All right, colleagues, any further questions?
I have a quick question.
Commissioner Udaley.
It's along the same lines. I mean, I can't pretend to that I understand the full scope of our banking needs, but I do know that there's this seemingly insurmountable challenge in that companies that may be more socially responsible just can't fulfill our demands or needs, banking needs. Is there any opportunity? I know we do work with multiple institutions, though. Is there any opportunity for us to move a small piece of what we do to either a community bank or a credit union?
We have moved, if you will, some of our deposit activity to those institutions, and that is where we look at the cash on hand and how we invest it. And so when we look at our investing activity, we have a portfolio of securities. We also have a relatively long list of long-term deposits. So it's on the investment side that we have engaged them as opposed to the operational, transactional side. And that operational, transactional side is really where we have found the larger institutions making the investment in the technology to do those things. And I'll just add that the city has centralized its activities. That's good from a control standpoint, also from a pricing standpoint, because it gives us a critical mass. And I've seen institutions break off activities and use multiple institutions to service those. I'm not sure how I would look somebody in the eye and say, well, we're designating you to go here, and we're designating you to go to this other institution, et cetera, and everyone has different pricing. That would get uncomfortable.
Thank you.
Sure.
Very good. Please call the roll.
Salzman.
Aye.
Udaley.
Aye.
Fritz.
Well, thank you for listening carefully to everything this morning. I appreciate that. And thank you for your financial expertise and also your ethics and principles. I very much appreciate the way you provide the services of the City Treasurer. Aye.
Fish.
Aye.
Wheeler.
Aye. The ordinance is adopted. Thanks, Jennifer. We are adjourned until 2 p.m.